Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the chat. Oh boy, Smudcast number 102. Why Rey is not a Mary Sue. This video just came out on the 20th, and I've been busy all last night and this morning, going to bed at 2, waking up early, replying to the comment section, and just going through every moment of this wonderful video and doing my best to keep up and trying to explain all the many errors in it. So if you think I'm going to be bad in the comment section, you can imagine everyone on the Smudcast talking about this video and just how good it is. How fantastic a video it is. So it took this guy quite a while to make it. It's a 2-hour and 26-minute video. So this is going to take us, I'm guessing, 2 weeks. The rate we go, I say 2 weeks is the way we do it. In between all the other videos we might be doing or Smudcast we might be having, the people might be bringing on. So sit back, relax. It's going to be a long one. And just enjoy the ride. Okay? So I have Shiny, my resident Star Wars expert here in case I screw up. And I have all my responses done for the first 50 minutes, which are in the comments. If you don't want to hear me talk, just go to the video itself and read the comments there. There's a bit of an argument, some other fanboy in there, but that's okay. Plus, AT chat's in there too. So always nice to have another fellow YouTuber. Just AT chat just brings a smile to my face. Anyway, I think we're ready to go. How are you doing, Shiny?
I am here.
You are here. That is a good living response from the organism known as man, who is here. Very Descartesian of you. Okay, let's get going, guys.
Rey is not a Mary Sue, and I'm going to prove this in 6 main parts. The first being an introduction to what a Mary Sue is, the second being an analysis of The Force Awakens, the third being an analysis of The Last Jedi, the fourth being an analysis of The Rise of Skywalker, the fifth being an analysis of external material, and the sixth being a conclusion. Now, before people freak out at there being a section about external material, please let me explain. I know external material should not need to be consumed to better understand a movie. That's why it's its own section. This section is not meant as a defense for the movies, but a defense for the canon. To some people, the canon matters more than the actual films, so this section is really for you guys. So when I actually do cover the 3 films, I'm not going to reference any other external material, other than the films and the shows. I do feel the shows are fair game, but if you disagree, then oh well. Also, since the trilogy is complete, I will be making references all across the trilogy when discussing each film. So when I'm talking about The Force Awakens, for example, I may reference The Last Jedi or The Rise of Skywalker. One last thing before I begin, if this video makes it on any sort of podcast where people are watching my video and analyzing my points,
Oh shit!
I would really appreciate it if you at least let me know
Oh
on
yeah,
Twitter
okay.
that if
Let me go do that, guys, just so I don't piss him off. I really don't want to piss anyone off who makes these videos. Let's go do that. It's the Goldman 25. YouTube.
Star Wars only. I can't remember where Star Wars only stands.
Yeah, I don't know.
This is probably a podcast he ended up jumping on.
Okay, all right. I shared it to Twitter. I specifically gave him an at the Goldman 25. In case that didn't happen, you guys can do that too. But everyone know. I told him I was going to do it. I actually asked him to come on to this Smudcast. He might come on in 2 weeks' time. He says he has to catch up with his homework because apparently making the video caused him to skip some work. I don't know. You know, it's different for everyone at school. That's fine. So, cool. Let's keep going.
video exists of people watching my video. My Twitter handle is thegoldman25. I don't really care if anyone streams this video. I'd just like to know so I can watch people reacting to my video. So anyway, that's enough with the intro. Let's begin with what is...
Well, can I just say I don't care if you care about our reactions. We're just going to do it.
Yeah, we will tear apart anyone's video regardless of if Shiny makes a crap video, we're going to tear it apart. Like, we don't care. We'll just do anything.
You do it to me.
Oh, yeah. Oh, especially you, Shiny. Come on. Why wouldn't we do that? What do you mean? I'm like anticipating the day where you make a bad video. I'm like, oh.
You're just going to pray. They did it.
Screw up for 2 seconds, Shiny. I'll be watching.
Like, we'll just be streaming the whole 2 seconds where I make a terrible argument and you just shit all over me.
I'll be a Maggie May Fish and focus on like a second and a half of you saying something about a black man. I'm like, oh, Shiny is a subconscious racist or something. Oh, it'd be great.
I don't even have to do it. I'll just show like one footage of something, anything, and just rip me apart for that. It doesn't even have to be connected.
Yeah, well, maybe I'm not that.
It's some people praying at a mosque, and all of a sudden, oh look, the film's racist and Islamophobic.
You never know. Anyway, here's Joe Crazy. Oh, Joe, what are you doing? This is your 11th time, man. Gentlemen, you know what time it is.
Stop complaining about free money.
It's not so much the super chat; it's what's in the super chat that's I'm complaining about.
Oh,
I can keep the hurt because it reminds me of something important. Data Sora? What the hell is Data Sora? Is that a Paramount crossover? Oh my god.
I don't know. I think it's supposed to be. I don't know.
Is he in a computer? Is he in the Matrix? Does Paramount own the Matrix? No, they don't think so. Okay, never mind. All right. Back to Star Wars.
A Mary. So what is a Mary Sue? And according to Wikipedia.com, and yes, Wikipedia is usually reliable, so don't let your teachers tell you otherwise. A Mary Sue is a generic name, a fictional character who is so competent or perfect that it appears absurd, even in the context of the fictional setting. Now, it's important to note that just because a character is overpowered, that doesn't necessarily mean they're a Mary Sue automatically.
Okay, so he's using a very loose definition, and the criteria we use are much more strict. They have much more variables. So it's not enough to just be overpowered. That's right.
Yeah, he's correct there. But I would, again, my definition I go to is it's a character which the rules of the world actively bend around, and it's a symptom of poor writing.
Well, yeah, we could. I mean, that's the thing. Like, it doesn't matter if you think her as a Mary Sue. You might think the term is too nebulous. There's too many criteria. If you don't want to do the research, that's totally fine. I don't mind that. But it's still bad writing. It doesn't matter what you call her. You can call it the symptoms from like 1970 or a new definition. It doesn't really matter. So long as you identify this character as a weak character and a form of wish fulfillment, which I'm sure LiteratureDevil will get into because he's made a few videos on this as well. The core element of a Mary Sue is wish fulfillment by the author, and how other characters who fit the criteria to a T and still aren't a Mary Sue, which is interesting because they're not main characters or the narrative doesn't focus on them. So you really have to know what the terms are, how they're used, and why they're good or bad. So. And I always go by the IDR Labs definition because he did a very good video, a few series of videos, really funny ones too. Is Sand a Mary Sue? And he compared Anakin, Luke, and Rey and did a very good job explaining it. And in that, he had 7 definitions, which I use as well. It's simple enough, but I always go back to TV tropes as the full list. And that's where we really put Rey through her gauntlet of Mary Sue-ness, and she hits almost all of them. It's amazing. Anyway, let's go.
Superman is a character that is definitely overpowered, but the reason Superman is not a Gary Stu, the male version of a Mary Sue, is because in his universe his powers are explained and they make sense. Superman is not...
No, it's not just explaining, you also need to... It needs to make work within the context of the world, and the world can't constantly keep bending around them. It's not just the power level, it's also like consequences. Yeah. In terms of lower decks, Marin isn't a Mary Sue because of her power level, she's a Mary Sue because everything is constantly warping around her to make sure she is constantly right all the time.
Right. And this is very similar to the argument with young Anakin. I usually say, just to keep it simple, that young Anakin is a Mary Sue. Episode 2 and 3, he's not. But his power level is explained. We know why he has all these abilities. And
yeah, because he's got metachlorians. But that just because it's explained doesn't mean it's not a Mary Sue.
Yeah, it's a bad explanation, but it's still an explanation. So I have to accept in the narrative this is the case. It's a dumb thing. It's a retcon. It destroys the other lore that came before, but you still have to accept it as fact. So it is an explanation. And all we really want out of all these factors, out of all these variables that make someone or something a Mary Sue or a plot device or whatever, is an explanation that makes sense. So it's still contrived, the stuff he does. It still makes him a Mary Sue, even though he's on the scale. So I say 6 out of 7, a lot for young Anakin.
Human, he is Kryptonian, an alien race from the planet Krypton. The reason why Superman is so strong is because since he grew up on Earth, he's exposed to our sun rather than the sun near Krypton. When exposed to a young yellow star like Earth's sun, which is much smaller than their own sun and with a vastly higher energy output, their body...
I think in the movie with Zack Snyder, it was more than just the sun. I think it was the air that they were breathing as well. So maybe I got that wrong, but anyway.
Bodies are able to absorb and process so much energy that it eventually manifests as vast superhuman powers, like super strength or flight, for example. Obviously, none of this makes sense in real-life science, but it doesn't have to. Superman lives in a fictional universe with its own fictional rules, and given those sets of rules, his powers make sense. So
it's not just
that's
about
why
making
Superman
sense.
is not a Gary Stu. Now back
okay, so for instance, if Superman had no consequences, if the world constantly kept warping around him in order to make him win, for instance, say Lex Luthor has Kryptonite, a very on-the-nose thing of you can't contradict this is his one weakness. All of a sudden, he's not weak to Kryptonite, and he's able to pick it up, smash it, and throw it away, and it has no bearing, it has nothing there. Then that would make him a Mary Sue, even though his powers are explained.
That was a huge problem with a lot of the comic book authors, especially in Superman, the various colors of kryptonite, how they work, when they work, how much, is it dust, is it an actual piece? So and then they go crazy with like Green Lantern and all the various colors of lanterns there are. So you really have to be careful with the writers and how they update or change or retcon lore. It's very important. And that's a whole other problem. So retcons are a one aspect of that. And if you're talking about altering the universe, that is also a retcon on top of what makes a Mary Sue. It's kind of like once you see a bad writing technique, it usually lends itself to other bad elements.
The definition. Mary Sues may excel at tasks that should not be possible.
Okay, he just glazed right over the main element right there, which LiteratureDevil would zero in on, which is Mary Sues are often an author's idealized or flawless self-insertion. And that's where all this comes about. It's all because the author wants a power fantasy or this perfect character to do the things that they feel is very important to the story for whatever reason. So once you identify with that and understand that, the rest of the stuff makes perfect sense. Oh, they're overpowered because it's power fantasy. That's exactly why.
For them. They may upstage the protagonist of a fictional setting, such as saving them. They may disregard previously established aspects of the fiction, such as characterization and natural laws.
So that's interesting because upstaging the protagonist, implying the Mary Sue is not the protagonist. There's a character off to the side, a secondary or tertiary character who's just amazing. Like, let's take Mary Poppins. She is actually a Mary Sue. The thing is, it doesn't damage the narrative as much as you think because she's not the focus. She's a supporting character. She's secondary, even though the film is called Mary Poppins, etc., etc.
So going back to the Superman example, if he all of a sudden could shapeshift into other characters, that would be a trait of a Mary Sue character because he would now have another very beneficial ability that doesn't match up with the rules established in the universe. But I do feel there needs to be something said about rules of a universe, because I do think there is a stark difference between whether or not something breaks the rules of a universe, or it expands upon the rules of a universe. In the case...
No, there's two very different things. There's a big difference between breaking and expanding.
Yeah.
Breaking is like contradicting very heavily.
Yeah.
Expanding is, the thing is still the same, but here's a little bit more of it.
If you want to break a rule like the lore, you have to have a very, very good reason and to fill in that hole. The other thing you can do is take something like telekinesis, for example, and bend that to an extreme, saying I can use telekinesis in the Force to generate heat, which can start fires. So maybe you could fling fire or something like that. So long as there's a necessary connection between this element and the outcome, you can get away with it. You can't just have Yoda fling fire at people. It wouldn't make sense. Like it would not be proper. So telekinesis, we understand. We get it.
Of Star Wars.
I like to use an example. So breaking the rule of the law, or breaking law would be trying to think of an example actually within the media itself.
Well, that's easy. Take Leia flying through space. Her flying through space, I could buy, no problem. No wait in space. She has some force powers.
I'm trying to think of something very explicit that is contradicting, because there's a lot. Okay, it doesn't necessarily break it, but it is a contradiction of Rey just being able to use Jedi mind trick. She can just use it out of nowhere, no explanation. She just happens to know how to do it. Beep, bop, boop. She does a mind trick. That's a contradiction to our understanding of that. You're supposed to have a big ability to do that. It's not the best example I can come up with, but it's just the one I'm going off the top of my head. But then when it comes to other material that expands upon the ability, I would say, like say Clone Wars, when three of them use like the mind trick on a strong-minded individual to try and force him, because one of them wouldn't be enough. So that's again, terrible examples. I wish I had something better off the top of my head.
I think Rey lifting rocks everything that Rey does is amazing. So we've seen people lift stuff with Luke in the original trilogy, and he struggles. He barely can do it. He can do a few things. He can try to push the X-Wing. Rey does not even train to lift stuff. And at the end of Last Jedi, she picks up a mountain. Not only does she pick up several dozen human, if not larger sized boulders, they just naturally fall away while she goes to hug Finn, and they just naturally fall into a nice, neat order. It's like, what?
Obviously, Mundane Matt was a very big fan of that scene.
Yes. But Rey can't be a Mary Sue. She's very good with boulders. Anyway.
Source of power comes from the Force. However, in each movie of the Skywalker saga, a new Force power is introduced. In The Empire Strikes Back, you could levitate objects with the Force.
No
in
contradiction.
Return of the Jedi, you can now shoot lightning from hands.
No
in The Phantom Menace, you can run at super speed, and boy, would that have been convenient at the end.
Actually, no.
In Attack of the Clones, you can absorb lightning in your hand.
I'll take that back. That was a stupid Force ability, Force run, or Force speed.
Yeah, that was essentially just Lucas speeding up the film.
Yeah, it was an editing error, as far as I've heard. So it wasn't intentional.
And there's lots of other things that they could have done in that scene, because it contradicts the desire to go and save his master when that ridiculous wall of energy. There's like 3 of them or 4 of them.
I can think of like one or two things which were done in Force Awakens, that were new Force abilities which are added, which are fine. And one of them is like Force stasis. I could that's a power I could accept. When you use the Force and it freezes.
We're all talking about telekinesis to a point. You're manipulating matter to move to your will, so have it fly through the air, etc. So holding an object in space, whether a blaster bolt or otherwise, makes perfect sense to me. It's like, fine, yep, I can believe it. It's still telekinesis. With Palpatine shooting lightning out of his fingertips, you're like, okay, that's new. But again, you're talking about telekinesis. You can use static energy coming out of atoms and manipulate it on an atomic level.
In fact, I think it's described as just energy. So it's just force energy which is being used.
Yeah, like it's not a huge stretch. Like again, if he was using fire, that would be a stretch. You'd be like, wait a second, how did that happen? Where did fire come into play? You know, is he generating heat by moving the subatomic particles really, really quickly? But where's the heat come? What's the fuel for heat? Like what is he burning? So there's lots of questions like that. Like you can't just make water come out of thin air. That'd be stupid. So manipulating energy, electrical energy. Can Yoda do that? I can buy it. Again, telekinesis. You can mold something into his hand, catch it, launch it off. Fine.
Mm-hmm.
Not that big a jump. It's still a jump, just not that big a jump.
In Revenge of the Sith, you can literally save yourself from dying by using the dark side.
He didn't save himself from dying. He was dead for rights.
He was on fire. He was a smoldering corpse, and somehow I don't know how he still managed to be alive. And then they use technology to bring him back. It has nothing to do with the Force.
I think what he's talking about is more along the lines of KOTOR 2, the Sith Lord that couldn't die because of his hatred was so strong.
Yeah, something like that I can understand in the Sith world because that's what causes them to be strong. So they can keep their organs working, they can keep themselves alive. That would make sense because
I'm not even sure if his organs were working because the moment he just kind of stopped being angry, he just kind of died.
He's screaming. But yeah, it was technology that saved Anakin's life.
In The Force Awakens, you can just stop blaster bullets with the Force. In The Last Jedi, you can force project yourself across the galaxy.
Okay, so this is where it gets a little like, okay. I get the idea of sensing a loved one from far, far away in pain or trying to answer or call out to you. That's like, okay, it's a very weak thing. And what Rian Johnson did was say, hey, what if they actually could communicate? And you're like, okay, maybe. What if they could actually like transfer information? It's like, okay. What if they can like share objects? I'm like, wait, now you're doing teleportation. Like this is getting a little hokey.
Yeah, I think the Force Skype. That's a stretch, and then the Force teleportation is also a stretch.
Yeah, when it gets to episode 9, episode 9 is just stupid. So everything happens episode 9. Just don't even consider it logical.
I know some people have gone to Empire Strikes Back to try and defend it, but I don't actually think that in Empire Strikes Back it was like they were communicating with each other. They just sensed each other. They didn't have a conversation, did they? They just said, he said, "Father." They said, "Luke."
This is the idea behind. Is Snoke a souped up Palpatine clone? Like, is he like, I don't know, genetically modified because his face is all messed up and like he has supreme power, or is Luke also on the same level? Because Luke can do it too. So, what's the story there? We don't know the story, and this is the problem. It just sort of.
There is a difference between things like Obi-Wan being able to sense pain through the Force is. Billions of people died. Or like sensing someone they care about through the Force dying, for example.
Yeah, a connection between twins makes sense. It's like, all right.
Well, like twins, a connection between a master and a Padawan, or two good friends. People who have made a Force bond through their connection.
Yeah, they didn't really go into Force bonds in the movies, I don't think.
I know, but it's more. While they didn't go into Force bond in the movies, I think it's still kind of like a thing. It's a general idea of if you spend time with someone and you care about someone, then you have a Force connection with them.
Yeah, I know. It's just that this connection across extreme distances and sharing data and touching and information, like water's being passed, and Luke can generate. I don't know. What do you call Force dice even after he's dead? Like, is he like having a lag between his death and the signal being sent to to crates, and then the dice are still there until they just dissipate. He's like, okay, what?
Yeah, I still don't like the force projection. I just don't think it fits. Like,
It's not as believable. That's when you go, wait, this is too much.
So I'm somewhat fine with the visions between Kylo and Rey. Somewhat. I don't think it was handled well. If you had a competent writer, maybe you could tell it well, but I'm not quite sure how.
Yeah.
But then when it comes to Luke's force projection, force projection, yeah.
Yeah, the thing is, because of the conversation between Rey and Kylo, there's a lampshade where they say, how is this possible? You can't be doing this, would kill you. So Kylo's like, this is actually possible, but not from you. So I can think someone else. But the logical deduction would be, well, it's my Sith Lord Master dude over here, or it's Luke. Why the hell would Luke do it? Why the hell would my master do it? So it's like this. Okay, there's only two people in the universe I know can do this. So it's this sort of lampshade. It's like, well, someone super powerful is doing it. It's like, okay, how powerful is Snoke?
And in The Rise of Skywalker, you can use the Force to heal people.
Okay, this is where we have a problem.
Okay, so imagine the way it was handled in Legends. Force healing was something which only a select few Jedi were capable of. Even in canon, things like Force Echo, which is what Rey used to sense all those visions with the lightsaber. In canon, Force Echo is an incredibly rare ability. But Force healing, because it's not ever expanded upon, now we're left with the questions like, why did Anakin not use Force Heal to save Padme? Or why didn't he use, I don't know, why didn't Obi-Wan use Force Heal to save Qui-Gon? Or any of the other characters that have died with a Force user near them?
Yeah.
Why didn't they just use Force Heal?
We have to assume that our Princess Leia is not an uber Force user. She's just sort of like practicing. She knows she knows the drills. She knows the routines. She can do basic stuff. We don't think that that's where Rey picked it up, because that would have been a huge thing.
Yeah, and she just kind of learns it on her own. Like, it's more believable that someone in a Jedi temple, with ancient Jedi texts could, learn this ability.
Yeah,
but she has a book, and she has Leia.
If you want to go from nothing to touching someone and healing them from death, you really have to build that up. It's the same with putting a lampshade over the connection between Rey and Kylo and TLJ. You have to have exposition. You have to explain. Like, maybe she's sensing life. She's feeling things. She understands. And you zoom in and you see the cells, binding together or something. Something like that. Give us more than just, oh, I can do it now. It's like, wait, stop. JJ, this is not how writing works. You can't just have someone whip magic out of their ass and bring people back from the dead. That's ridiculous. So that should have been the climax that should have been the build up to the climax of the film. She's sensing how to heal. She knows life and she understands, and her senses are going nuts. So she has to turn it away because she's not sure about herself and she's all reluctant to do it. And then she figures it out. And the idea of her picking it up along the way, like she heals the snake, she heals a friend, she heals this or that, and then finally she heals. Like, that would have at least shown a progression that she's learning.
No. She didn't heal Kylo. Kylo healed her. So Kylo also knew how to use the Force ability.
Yeah, so she brought Kylo back from the dead, and then Kylo.
So if people are trying to say that Force heal is like an incredibly rare ability, what's the likelihood, if it's a rare ability, that these two people just happen to know how to do it?
So what I'm trying to say is that if a new power is introduced, there's an unclear line between whether or not it's an expansion of the mythos or if it's a contradiction of the lore.
Well, all you have to do is look at the lore and say, oh, it's a contradiction.
Is it new or is it a contradiction? That's all you have to do.
So if a power is introduced, the question may arise as to whether or not it contradicts the lore or expands the mythos, which is very important. But the bigger question that may arise is, why was this power never used before? Now, I'm going to continue on with this point when I talk about Rey's force healing, so I'm not done with this yet, but I just wanted to make the point that there's a difference between expansion and contradiction.
Yes, there is.
Back to what a Mary Sue is. The term Mary Sue originated all the way back in 1973. A woman named Paula Smith wrote a Star Trek fanfiction named A Trekkie's Tale, and in it created a character named Lieutenant Mary Sue. She was the youngest lieutenant in the fleet, and she was only 15 years old. Mary Sue was pretty much the perfect person. Everyone loved her, she was very smart, very talented, so talented that she won a Nobel Peace Prize for her ability to fly the Enterprise. Even though she eventually died from an illness, everyone loved her so much that they decided to make a single day per year devoted to her. So now that we know what a Mary Sue is and where it originated from, why are Mary Sue characters bad and why should they be avoided? For one, characters are at their best when they are flawed. No human beings are perfect, and if you want to make your characters as relatable as possible, then you should want to make them as flawed as possible.
Okay, this is a misconception. You might be thinking to yourself, hey, get as many flaws as you can under your belt. It's like, well, you can go too far. You could have a quadriplegic, deaf, dumb, blind, tasteless, belching, screeching person, and then what? What are you going to do with his character? He's a blob. That's not much of humanity to work with. You can tell a story that way, but good luck. So you don't want to go too far with the flaws and the failings of humanity. You want one really good flaw that it's expressed well, that other characters pick up on, and it damages the relationship between them and the main character. That's what you really need. And if you know how to do that well, then you should maybe try a second flaw, but then you're just doubling your amount of effort of creating characters that run off that flaw, attack that flaw, and get a second climax or a second arc going to change that flaw. The only reason you have a flaw, aside from identifying with the humanity of the character, is to come to an arc, to come to the climax where they grow and change from that flaw. If you start giving them multiple flaws, first off, this guy is going to be the worst person in existence. He's going to have like nothing going for him. And what is he going to do? Is he going to crawl out of this hole? How can he crawl out of a hole when he has no arms and legs and intellect? Like, what does this guy have to do? And you can still tell a story like that way, but it's going to be the strangest, weirdest story because he has no a capacity to grow. So you really have to make a believable flaw that's humane and give them conflict that's also achievable and see them struggle and have conflict to get to where they need to go. So just the right amount. It's like Goldilocks. You want just the right amount of flaws to flex with your plot and the characters that support and hinder that growth. So I get what he's trying to say though, but in reality that doesn't work that way.
As well. Since Mary Sue characters are essentially perfect human beings, they don't have any flaws that the audience can relate with. Also, dynamic characters are the ones that spark change, whether it be within themselves or within other people. There is usually an essential flaw that a character possesses. The struggle to overcome that flaw is what makes a good story. So again, since Mary Sues don't have any flaws, there's nothing for them to overcome. Thus, there is no story. And lastly,
well, yes, there is a story. It's just a boring, bad story. So, I think he means there's no character.
Story where you have no low point.
Yeah, everyone's she's amazing. Oh, she's amazing again. Oh, she's amazing.
The only low point is that she gets a little bit upset and she goes off for a bit of a pout, and then she just happens to find Luke's X-wing after she tells him he was wrong this entire time and she was right and he should have listened to her, and then he says, "Oh, look, have my X-wing," and it goes off to fight Palpatine.
It's the same thing in TFA. She doesn't accept the saber. She runs off into the forest, and then the story follows her. BB-8 goes after her. The First Order arrives and captures her. It's like, oh, she refuses the call. Bravo, story, and everything else falls into place. Like, oh, okay.
In stories like Star Wars where there are many fights, you want your fights to have stakes, where your main character can lose or lose something. Since Mary Sues are extremely overpowered, there are no stakes because it's pretty much impossible for them to lose. Let's look at Iron Man 1 and Captain Marvel. By the way, I don't think Captain Marvel is a Mary Sue, but I don't think she's a good character either. In a one-on-one fight, Captain Marvel would easily beat Iron Man, but Iron Man is a much more beloved character because he is far more relatable, and he struggles to achieve his goals. Captain Marvel doesn't struggle at all.
I wouldn't say a billionaire playboy philanthropist is very relatable on surface level. I think what people care about is because he struggles and he has to work for everything he has in terms of he has to make Iron Man from the ground up, and he struggles with issues.
There's plenty of reasons to like either character. The argument's not for
not Captain Marvel.
Well, I'm just saying people like Captain Marvel for reasons. I don't know what those reasons are, but they're there. That's fine. Let's just see what he has to say.
Film, really. And the climactic battle has no tension because she is way more overpowered than everyone else.
Yes.
So that is why you want flawed and relatable characters, not Mary Sues. Now, there's one last thing I want to talk about in this opening section, and it's kind of a tough topic to address. Many people claim that the Mary Sue label is sexist. I don't believe that if someone calls a character a Mary Sue that it automatically makes them sexist, but I do believe there is a double standard. Now, I could be wrong in saying this, but this is just my own observation from my own personal experiences. I see female characters called Mary Sues all the time, such as Rey, Captain Marvel, Arya Stark, and Korra, just to name a few.
I could tell you for a fact 3 of those are.
There's all kinds of male Mary Sues. There's all kinds of female Mary Sues.
He just said that he doesn't believe the term is sexist, but he says it's a double standard, and he's very heavily inferring that the reason why they're being called Mary Sues is because they're women. Again, there are plenty of male characters which have been called Marty Stews or Gary Stews or whatever you want to say that the male version is. Wesley Crusher is a famous example.
There's entire cities, like perfect societies of all these like elves or vampires or pick your fantasy genre. They're going to have amazing superpowers. They live forever. They're gorgeous. They're beautiful. They're super smart. They're super strong. I mean, it just keep going. Go through any science fiction that's poorly written. Like take the authors or the Star Trek by William Shatner, the Shatnerverse, right? Mm-hmm. Kirk is pretty much a Mary Sue. I mean, if you ever read it, it's just ridiculous. It's like Shatner. Maybe you shouldn't touch the novels anymore, sir. That's too much for you. So it happens in fiction all the time.
I'm trying to think because never mind.
Yeah, it's not important. Again, we can do searches online and find a whole bunch. It's not a big deal.
But almost never do I hear a male character called a Gary Stew. If you're someone who believes that any of those characters I listed above are Mary Sues or some other characters, can you also name any men who are Gary Stew?
Wesley Crusher. There you go.
Yeah, there's a few in the Wheel of Time books. If Dunn was here, I'm sure he'd tell us because he knows those books a lot. So, the thing is, those books were written to put the author into his grave, so he just wanted to keep writing and writing and writing. So, when you do that with that mindset, you're going to be writing a lot of characters that are just going to be awesome because you don't want to kill them off. So, there's lots of ways that Mary Sues get created, and they're not all created equal. They're not all perfect 7s, or they're not all perfect 53s, or whatever the huge list is on TV tropes. So they're there, and the gender does not really matter. So,
I think there is a reason why there are more female characters that are being called Mary Sues. It's because there is a more increase of female characters being written as Mary Sues. You don't get I think like in today it's a lot more. You're less likely to get a character like who's a man who's going to be absolutely brilliant at everything like Wesley Crusher is.
Sure, it really depends. I mean, some are done on purpose, like Squirrel Girl, but that's the nature of the genre, or her counterpart, which is Deadpool, I guess you want to say. So, I mean, there's an manga, I can't remember the manga, Sakamoto-kun, I think. I'm Sakamoto-kun. Like, he's pretty much perfect. But that's the joke. That's the whole point. So they have characters for other purposes aside from being perfect. It's to make you laugh. It's to be a joke.
I can name some other characters which I don't believe to be Mary Sue's, but people have made accusations towards. Superman, Batman, who else? I had another one in my head just 5 seconds ago. I think some people have even called Han Solo Gary Stu, Luke, just all these other characters which have been John Wick. I don't agree, but there's still people who call them Gary Stu.
They are on the spectrum of having unexplained power levels or, power levels that exceed everyone else's. So the conflict is not as high. So here's a super chat from Rin Wesley. Is Paul Atreides a Mary Sue? It depends on which book you read. In Children of Dune, pretty much no, because he's thrown himself away from the limelight, and he's just a wandering prophet. And he's pretty much attacking the dynasty that he's created as this beggar in the street. So you could say maybe his son Leto is a Mary Sue, but he becomes a giant worm god king. So he can foresee the future. He knows everything that's going to happen. So there's lots of things to talk about. They're all on the spectrum, but that doesn't make them a Mary Sue, and it doesn't necessarily make them a bad character. You see. Same with Mary Poppins. She is a Mary Sue, but it doesn't damage the story. So Paul Atreides isn't the focus of that story, so it doesn't matter. When you have a protagonist be the Mary Sue, that's when things get bad.
I feel like I could make the argument that many of the superheroes we see are Gary Stu's, but I don't want to because I don't believe that they are. The only man who I've ever heard been called a Mary Sue was Starkiller, but besides that, I've never heard it used before. So again, this is just my own observation, but I do feel there's a double standard between a Mary Sue and a Gary Stu.
I would say it's not a double standard. I just think that's the nature of fanfic writing and what women pop up, like young women pop up with. I think that's all it comes down to. For whatever reason, women just don't get not writing.
In terms of Star Trek and in terms of Star Wars, I think that these characters are definitely made, and also Captain Marvel, are made because of, I think, political reasons. That's the kind of motivation behind why they've been made Mary Sue's.
I do agree with LiteratureDevil in that the main focus is wish fulfillment from the author. So because it's fanfic stuff from women or young ladies, that tends to be the focus. And so they'll have the perfect character.
But he's not talking about fan fiction. He's talking about media today, like Marvel films or TV shows.
You could make the same argument for TFA. It's the same idea. Whether JJ has the mentality or the writing chops of a fanfic writer makes no difference. It's the same thing. If the end result's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But that is my introduction to the term Mary Sue, and now it is time to discuss the films. Up first, we have The Force Awakens. Now, basically what I will be doing is going through each scene that I feel helps flesh out Rey's character and disprove the Mary Sue argument. Obviously, there are some scenes that I will spend a lot of time on. And
so again, his definition is not very clear. We're kind of like, all right, overpowered, yeah, and then he just sort of rambles on as the story, as his video goes, which is fine, but that means we're going to be even stricter with our definition and prove that she is a Mary Sue. So
there will be others that I don't spend that much time on. Now, in preparation for this video, I did watch many videos on why Rey is a Mary Sue, so I will try to address these points as much as I can. But without further ado, let's begin. The first scene with Rey is her daily life on Jakku. Now, for the sake of clarification, I'm going to classify Rey's introduction as everything up until the point where she meets Finn. So this includes her first trip to Nima Outpost, rescuing BB-8, her second trip to Nima Outpost, and her fighting those thugs. Sound good? Good. So let's look at this scene. Now, if I were to do a moment-by-moment breakdown, there's nothing in this opening scene that depicts Rey as a Mary Sue, but this scene is essential in providing reasons why Rey is so good at the things that many people see her as being a Mary Sue. So I'm going to spend a fair amount of time.
So the argument that Scavenger, therefore not a Mary Sue, is just really reaching, but that's fine. We'll see where he goes.
Time on this to highlight what is shown to us in this scene. And to do that, I'm going to compare Rey's opening to Luke's opening from A New Hope. Because for one, both openings are very similar, and two, many people love to make the argument that Luke isn't a Mary Sue, but Rey is, and use this opening scene as an example as to why. So let's compare what we learn about these two in this scene. First, we learn that Luke is a farmer and Rey is a scavenger, both with a similar skill set. Both are engineers of some kind.
No, they're not. Okay, he uses engineers way too strongly. An engineer is someone who has studied at a university or a higher level of education and can build stuff like, if he's a mechanical engineer, then bridges. A nuclear engineer, he can fix nuclear reactors. Electrical engineer, obviously electrics, electronics, etc., etc. So he's no one in this story.
Neither of them are engineers. They might twiddle in mechanics.
Yeah, you could argue Luke is a technician or a mechanic. I think anyone in the Star Wars universe is automatically knowledgeable of technology. They may not know how to use it. They can clean it. They can fix it here and there, replace parts, but they're not going to like rebuild a computer, okay, like from scratch.
When it comes to droids, and both know how to drive a speeder. Where they differ slightly,
they know how to drive a speeder.
Weaponry. Luke can use a rifle, and Rey can use a staff. Now, their skill set was never the problem, but how these characters obtain this skill set is what seems to be up for debate.
Okay, so it is in fact where they got the skill set and how good they are at that skill set. Okay, so it's having a power level, and then where did this power level come from? So having an overpowered power level.
Both films never straight up tell us how these characters learned these skills, but based off of clues given to us in the film, we can logically infer how these characters obtained these skill sets. In films, the storytellers do not have the same luxuries that books do. They need to show us things for the audience to infer, while the books can straight up tell the audience. In the case of Luke, we see that Luke works on his uncle's farm. Since a lot of these skills that he has here are skills that are useful when it comes to farming, it is a safe assumption to make that his aunt or uncle taught him how to use these things. Now, many people would point to Rey and say there is nothing that can help us logically infer how Rey learned these skills, but I completely disagree. We are shown that Rey essentially works for Uncar Putt on a commission-type basis. She goes to him twice in the opening scene
No, this isn't the Uncle Putt argument, is it?
Yes, it is.
Oh, no. It's the Uncle Putt.
Yeah, apparently this guy raised her and taught her everything he knew. All we know of Rey is she gets salvage and she washes it. That's her skill set, okay?
Okay, so farming, yeah, I think if his uncle's a farmer and he grew up on a farm, yes. I could accept Rey being a scavenger. I could accept Rey knowing how to drive a speeder. I could accept Luke knowing how to drive a speeder. Rey being an engineer, though, no. She knows how to fix things somehow, but her entire skill set should be that she knows how to rip them apart because she's a scavenger.
Yeah, that's about it. There's no other explanation how she has these skills, how she could speak Wookiee and all these other things. Anyway, let's see his argument.
Mechanical part for food rations, and even makes a point about a part being a different price a week ago. And later on in the movie, when she has her Force vision, she is left with Uncar Putt when she was like 9 years old.
That entire 2 seconds of Uncar Putt pulling her away is somehow an explanation for everything.
I really doubt they have this really close-knit relationship, partly because doesn't he send like people after her like 5 minutes after she doesn't want to sell him the droid? People
are saying that's the person that her parents sold her to because they wanted drinking money. There's no evidence of that. For all we know, the people in the ship flying away were the people they sold the Rey for drinking money, and they're just dropping her off. We don't know. We don't know the relationship between Uncar and Rey, aside from if she has stuff he wants, he'll give her some food rations for it. That's it.
Khan asks her who's in possession of the Falcon all this time. She's able to tell him a long list of people who stole the Falcon.
Who had it? Duquesne?
I stole it from Uncar Putt. He stole it from the Irving boys who stole it from Duquesne.
Who stole it from me?
And when Rey and Finn first...
Okay.
Then how does she know that information? Again, you can't... Okay, so she... I guess you could know it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's her uncle.
Well, just because she has information on a ship doesn't mean she was taught skills by Uncar Putt. It doesn't make sense.
I guess the best explanation you can possibly have for that line is maybe she heard rumors, or maybe she was told something by someone.
Yeah, there's scuttlebutt around Nema base or whatever it's called, and they talk. It's like, that's it. They shared information. Where'd that ship come from? Oh, it's from the Irving brothers.
It's kind of specific to know.
Yeah, it's basic stuff. She heard people talking. She talked to someone who knew this.
If Luke all of a sudden came up and knew all these things about a ship, like this, its entire history about who's owned it before then. So I don't even think Uncar Putt would know who stole it before they stole it from.
Enter the Falcon, she knows that the ship had not flown in years.
No! This ship hasn't flown in years!
Possibly because it's sitting there, covered in tarps.
Yeah, you could just watch it as you fly across the on your speeder. It's like, oh, it's still not in the air. It's been, 4 or 5 years? Wow, that's fantastic. Thanks. That's great.
There's also a deleted scene that highlights the relationship further, but deleted scenes do not count, and they count as extra material,
yeah, this looks...
so I am not going to count it here.
What a great relationship,
He looks like his total uncle, yeah. He's a total
nice
mentor
guy
to this girl.
I'm going to teach you how to fix the Millennium Falcon there. From a young age of 9.
He's forcibly grabbing her arm. I don't think that's a nice scene.
Trying to make is that it can be logically inferred that Rey learned her skill set from Uncar Putt.
How could it be logically? The guy even knows what logical inference is? It's not hard.
Okay, so this guy is also a scavenger, or at least has knowledge in scavenging. How does that make him know anything about engineering? How does it make him know about anything else? All he does is he sits in a window and says, "Oh, look, here's some food."
There's no information.
1/4 portion.
Yeah, there's really no. I mean, when I was working in a games, pretty much a GameSpot or a GameStop, what's called Microplay in Canada, it used to be called Microplay. I had no idea the value of games people wanted to buy or sell to me, and I'd have a database telling me, okay, this game is worth this much. I could buy it for that much. Like, that was it. I had no idea because there's thousands of games out there over the years. I was like, I don't know what this is. Pokemon.
He doesn't exactly look like an engineer, does he?
No, he looks like a crazy old man who's really angry.
Dexter Jetster looks like he would know more about engineering from having to fix his fucking oven.
Apparently he's a master engineer or something. Who knows?
Uncar uses scavengers to bring him parts, so it would make logical sense that he trains them to be able...
No, it's not. It would not make logical...
Oh my god, he pulls a gun on him.
She's gonna kill him. What the hell's going on? It would make logical sense he would train Rey to scavenge stuff. It's like, hey, Rey, if you want to eat, see that junk pile? Go over there, get me some stuff, wash it up, and I'll give you some food. Can you do that for me? Good. I'm busy. Go away.
Fuck off.
Pretty much. Yeah.
To scavenge certain things and to have a strong engineering background. If Uncar Putt doesn't have capable scavengers, then he doesn't have a business to run.
Okay, let's assume the worst case scenario. He teaches no one. He says, I'm not going to feed you unless you give me some cool stuff. So they start taking apart the stuff they got, and they keep doing that. They go, okay, I'm not going to feed you until you give me stuff. Well, there's a big junk pile over there. Go get some stuff, okay? That's the worst case scenario. Didn't teach them anything. It's like if you have stuff to throw away and you go to the junkyard and they'll give you a few bucks for it. That's the relationship. I never go to the junkyard at all ever unless I have to throw stuff away that's too big. All right? That's all it is.
If Uncar Putt have any interest in training scavengers, then why would he take on Rey when she was so young?
Who knows? We have no idea why. Why are you you're not inferring this, you're inducing. Okay, inference is a deduction going backwards. He is inferring things. He's starting with a premise and going, well, the conclusion must be X, because how else did Rey learn all these skills? Uncar Putt taught her to them. So no, that's not how critical thinking works. He's doing the opposite of that. So this is basic logic stuff. So I'm not gonna harp on it anymore. But this is how he thinks.
The largest part of Rey's Mary Sue-ness doesn't even come from her scavenging background or her knowing how to fix the Falcon, or even I don't think the largest part of it is her knowing how to fly the Falcon expertly. It's more to do with her force ability.
Right, but even then, like, how did she learn droid language? Uncar Putt. How did she learn Wookiee language? Uncar Putt. How did she learn to fix the Falcon? Uncar Putt. Like, it's
no. Even then, you can't even say Uncar Putt because she doesn't know how she knows how to fly the Falcon. At the end they say, "How'd you do that?" And Rey goes, "I don't know."
Yeah, she admits it. She's always in awe of herself. When she flies the Falcon, when she fires the pistol, when she does the Force mind trick the second time, she's like, oh my God, what's happening to me? And if that was the theme of the story, that the Force is actually awakening in her, and it's so powerful and no one's ever seen this before, even Snoke is mystified, then that would have been a good story. Because that would have been the whole story is Rey being a Mary Sue. And if you give us a reason why she's not a Mary Sue, it's the Force awakening in her in magical ways we've never seen before. Tell us that story. We never got it.
I don't think he did it out of the kindness of his heart. Also, another thing
How do you know he did it at all?
about Rey's skill set, given the circumstances she lived in, she definitely had to adapt. I can easily imagine when she was like a 13-year-old girl that she would get beaten up a lot because she wasn't strong enough to defend herself.
Okay,
This is good. This
not
is
in
fun.
the film, not even in first.
It's not in the film, but you could say in order to survive, she had to eat, and we understand the logical connection between food and scavenging. That's great. There would be fights. There would people be fighting over food, fighting over scrap. She would learn to fight. I get that much. I'm on board. You can make these basic
the
things.
specific thing of when she was 13 years old, she got beat up. That there is nothing to even infer that in the film.
No. You're right. But we could say that something happened along the way where she got into a pattern.
I can agree that if she had to grow up as a scavenger, she had to fight for people who wanted her food or something.
Right. So
it's a very lawless place. And she obviously learned scavenging by, here's a junk pile. Okay, this is going to get me money. Here, give me some food.
Right. And maybe because a staff is a nice, solid, sturdy tool, it could also be used as a weapon. She might have used that a few times. Okay, I'm with you so far. Like I can buy that. That's kind of like.
I want to point out she is in a battlefield full of guns.
Yeah.
Why doesn't she use a gun?
Yeah, and she had a gun in that cutscene. I don't know where that gun came from since.
Well, the gun was given to her by Han Solo.
Oh, so that's the scene in the bar.
Scene itself,
what was Uncar Putt doing there?
I don't know, but he was in the bar for some reason. It was in the background was the bar.
I thought this was on the other planet. Okay, never mind. On Jakku. Never mind. It's okay.
But it's anyway. She has a staff when she's on a battlefield full of guns, and I think a gun is a little bit more than a staff, just a little. I mean, the whole reason why Jedi use melee weapons is because they can block like blaster bolts. They can use the Force or do all sorts of crazy shit.
We have to survive. So if you're someone who lives on Jakku, then it is more than likely that you have some sort of combat experience.
You are in a rough and tumble environment. You're a street kid or a desert kid, however you term this. Again, we buy it. She learned how to survive. Okay. That doesn't mean she's a bowmaster or, she can talk to Wookiees immediately. So
or use the Force, or suddenly know how to use a lightsaber, or
etc.
Again, she's never used a blaster her entire life. Instant quick shot.
Yeah, I know. It's like, I've never fired. It's like, really, you've been alive this long, you've never had a gun in your environment? Okay.
And then she when Han Solo tries to give her the gun, she's like, I don't need it. I can look after myself. So that's why I'm giving it to you.
Because you can. That's the point.
Besides establishing skill sets and how those skill sets make sense, the opening scene sets up her essential flaw, and that is her insecurities about her parents.
Okay, it's not an insecurity. It's a random need to attachment. It's not an insecurity.
I would say this is more of her desire, her plot. She wants to find her parents.
It's her motivation.
I wouldn't call that a flaw. A flaw is when you have a psychological scenario, like a character trait that's negative, usually negative, and the people around you can't befriend you, or there's some animosity between you two as a result of that. This is like basic contemporary flaws. I'm not talking about like Superman and comic books. I'm talking about humanity. And throughout the course of a story, you learn and develop that, I'm a piece of shit. I gotta figure this flaw out and apologize or be nice to XYZ. And then you come to a climax, you grow and change as a character, and you go positive or negative or what have you, and voila, that's a story. That's an arc. So her wanting and waiting for her parents, I don't see that as a flaw. I really don't.
It's definitely not a character flaw. It's again motivation, and I'm not even sure why she's been waiting. How old was she when she was left? Like 7, 8?
Little girl, yeah.
Little girl. So like 12 years. In the entirety of her 12 years, she's not become disillusioned with the idea of her parents.
And I think it's
wouldn't she be a little bit pissed at them?
Yeah,
not want anything to do with them.
She wants to belong to something, and that's her parents. But then she realizes, I guess it's not going to be my parents. It should be something else. She latches on to Han, and then he goes away.
That's the whole plot. Like, it's a Mary Sue trait to like everything is too like. It's her only flaw is that she's too positive. She's too trusting.
Yeah. That's one of the many elements of, again, the criteria for Mary Sue is very big. So some of them are not always there. But again, with Rey, it just almost fits the bill in the strictest of criteria.
People who claim Rey is a Mary Sue love to say that she has no flaws and that she's perfect. But this opening scene does so much to establish her flaws. I think the reason that people might look over this is because this scene shows us her flaws rather than...
This scene is also like has nothing to do with anything. Like once we leave, that's it. The whole point of the scene is to establish Rey's character, and it doesn't establish any flaws. It's just Rey's everyday life. She goes to a Star Destroyer, she pulls out some things, she then goes away, and then she ends up running into thingy. She cleans some parts before selling them, and then that's it. That doesn't establish any flaws. It just establishes she's been here for a long time. She's a scavenger, and a couple other things. No flaws.
All right, here's non-vitae rex. Rebel or Empire soldiers scavenge the battlefield for weapons after the battle was over, but then why would they leave heavy equipment like AT-ATs?
But like with the amount of soldiers, it'd be very difficult to get every single blaster, especially consider how much is left inside these Star Destroyers. There's entire TIE fighters. And I assume in those TIE fighters, wouldn't there be like a pistol for the pilot? Or, I don't know, there's some weapons locker in some Star Destroyer. And why would the Rebels even bother about this tiny blaster if they can't be bothered about, I don't know, a giant AT-AT or even a Star Destroyer? If they can't be bothered about those larger resources, why would they care about these little smaller ones? Like, a blaster's nothing compared to a Star Destroyer. Why wouldn't they scavenge the Star Destroyer?
Yeah, there's no mention of the Empire doing massive scavenging operations of the battle where they lost,
or the rebellion,
or whatever. Yeah, they just leave it and keep going. So if they're even alive after the battle. So I don't mind the stories of scavengers and whatnot, and Rey being a scavenger. It's like using the scavenger role to explain all of this is not very helpful.
telling
Was it
us.
the super
Now,
chat?
you
Yeah,
could
the super chat was talking about where I said, okay, so this is a battlefield. Why doesn't she have a gun? Why does she have a stick? And that was what the super chat was replying to, I think.
I see.
argue that this scene does do a great job at that. Now, I would disagree with this for the reasons I'm about to mention. Rey's flaw in The Force Awakens is her inability to accept that her parents left her and aren't coming back.
No, that's not a flaw. We've talked about this. Okay.
One of the weaknesses that Rey possesses is that she's always looking for external validation.
No, she's not.
The whole thing, she's looking to belong. And that's not necessarily validation.
I mean, I guess everyone wants some degree of external validation, but it's regarding fitting in. It's like, yeah, she wants to fit in. We get it. She doesn't know.
And it's not necessarily a flaw.
Yeah, it's kind of a strange argument. I was like, yeah, everyone wants to fit in unless they're already established, and Rey is not established. Is that it? Finn wants to fit in. He doesn't know what's going. Does he want external validation from Rey? Like, what's wrong? Like, does everyone who doesn't fit in have external validation as a flaw?
I think someone who doesn't fit in would, be less looking for validation, because if they did it their entire life, they wouldn't really care if anyone else.
Yeah, I think the obvious.
They've been excluded the entire life and didn't have any friends, etc.
Yeah, wanting to be part of something, I think, is natural in a society or a group of people. It's like, I want to be part of this in some capacity. It's not necessarily she wants head pats or pats on the back. I don't think so.
Neil has a good comment. What would have been a good flaw for Rey to have? Distrusting of others or being selfish. That would actually make sense. Considering her background, that would actually make a lot more sense.
And she is kind of like that with Finn at first, and then done, and then it goes away immediately. That's
is she selfish, or is she?
No, she's not selfish at all. She saves BB-8 just because she wanted to.
She's a little bit distrusting of Finn, yeah, and then it goes away, but not the selfish part.
Right.
In fact, she's nothing but selfless all the time. I love that. That's when Daisy Ridley came out saying that Mary Sue is a sexist term. She tries to say that, Rey is just a character that wants to help everyone and save everyone, not really understanding what the term Mary Sue really means.
Yeah. Plus, there's the time when she decides not to sell BB-8, even though she was going to be given a huge reward. So there's plenty of times where she's very selfless.
She is worthy or important if other people see her as worthy or...
No, she does not care about the opinion of others. She really doesn't. Not once does she look at Finn with like wanting, am I good? Am I strong? Am I needed? No, she just does her own thing.
Am I independent?
Yeah, she literally just does her own thing, and she doesn't care. Happens in episode 9 like crazy. She just goes off on her own.
Yeah. We see this throughout The Last Jedi as she keeps on trying to get the validation from Luke.
No. When does she do this? She wants to be taught by Luke, and she wants Luke to come back with her. That's it. Eventually, she gives up because Luke doesn't give a shit. She could have beaten him up and dragged him with her, but she didn't even do that. I'm just going to go with my feelings. When my feelings tell me I can turn Kylo, it's like, what? Okay. Bye.
We see this in The Rise of Skywalker when she tells Leia she isn't worthy of wielding Luke's lightsaber. And in the Force...
Okay, that scene is very specific. And those scenes with Leia are pretty bad. So if you don't remember the scene...
Yeah, it's all just to try and make... Whatever little lines they have with Leia, they're pretty much just trying to shove it in so that they can make some kind of situation, and she immediately gets the lightsaber back.
Yeah, I know. So she says, hey, I didn't finish the training course. I got distracted. I'm just not feeling myself. I know it looks like I'm making excuses. Then Leia turns around and goes, don't tell me what things look like. Tell me what they are. And you're like, what? Leia, what are you talking about? That line does not connect. And then she says, I think I'm just tired. That's all. And then Rey hands back the lightsaber to Leia. And she says, I will earn your brother's saber one day. And then BB-8 says something. And then Rey says, no, you can't do it for me. And then Leia says, never underestimate a droid. And then she walks off. And she's like, what is this scene?
It's like having two completely different conversations. It's like, hi there, hey, yeah, have you seen the droid about? It's like, you should never underestimate a droid. It's like, that's not what I asked you. So have you seen the weather? And it's like, yeah, the mountains look particularly crusty today.
Let's also be clear that at this point, she's calling Leia her master. So she's technically actually looking for a response from her master to give her some guidance. I mean, technically, you could be saying she's looking for external validation, but of what? What is she? Here's the saber back. I don't want it. The droid is a ha bye. What? They made a joke. It's like, thanks. Making a joke out of a scene where you're trying to espouse a character need, not the best argument. Let's just say that.
Force Awakens, Rey is searching for the approval of her parents. Her parents left her on a miserable planet with the most miserable people. If her parents return, then that means that she is important to them in some way. Again, tying into Rey's need to feel important by other people.
He is totally making, just so you guys know, he's totally making this up. He's projecting very hard. There's no psychological need for Rey wanting to be with her parents. She cries when Orange Lady tells you they're not coming back, and then she just goes on with life and she runs away.
Yeah, the closest he's getting is he's talking about Rey's. Like it's not. I would think validation is not the correct way of describing it. It's more that she's constantly looking for parental figures. And that is Han Solo, and that's not technically validation. And she immediately projects onto Han Solo. She immediately projects onto Luke Skywalker, and the whole thing is that she's too trusting. It's the over positive thing. The reason why she trusts her flaw is that she trusts Kylo, for instance, but that's only because she's too trusting. She's too nice. She's too good.
In the opening scene, we get many examples of this, most notably the scratches on her wall.
So counting the days that pass is her need for external validation. Okay. Okay.
Again, I really think that a person in this situation wouldn't be always looking for external validation. They would be like very disillusioned with the idea of a group. They wouldn't. They'd be kind of like an asshole. They'd be selfish. They wouldn't care about others, and that would be much more interesting character arc than what we actually fucking got,
which was a whole lot of nothing.
If her arc was that she has to trust others, or that she has to, I don't know, be selfless or something, she has to not look out for herself all the time and look out for others. That would be more interesting.
That would actually redeem a lot of things if she has to learn to grow as a character, as opposed to just being.
It makes sense that why would she care about her parents? They ditched her on a planet. They haven't been back for like 16-something years. Why the hell would you give two shits about them at that age? Maybe when she's a child, maybe that she would still be hopeful. But after so many years, you would lose hope and you wouldn't care.
When she says later on, I know all about waiting for my family, they'll be back one day.
I know all about waiting. For my family. They'll be back. One day.
We can
at this point,
logically
wouldn't
infer
she
that
say
these
that
are the days since her
Her family, like, minimum is like 18 years older than her, minimum, maybe 19. And at that point, they'd be like in their 40s, maybe their 60s, maybe older.
Yeah, it's a little strange.
It's like, why would she still be, like, you're just expecting some old people to come up with walking sticks? It's like, Rey, I'm your father.
Left. This is also something Kylo confirms in The Rise of Skywalker, but we'll get there much later. Now, a lot of what's shown in this scene actually seems to contradict that. She looks at this old woman in fear that she might end up like her.
No, she doesn't. How do you possibly deduce that? She just looks at an old woman, and the old woman's doing the same thing as her, and that's that.
I think this is the interpretation. I don't know if it's accurate, but I know that a lot of people have done this interpretation of the reason why this scene is here is that she's looking at her and realizing that she could be spending her entire life here like this old lady has. But the thing is, Rey's acting doesn't exactly put that across, because she just kind of stares blankly into space looking at this lady.
Yeah, you could interpret it that way, but that's not what actually happens, because you don't know what she's thinking.
Mm-hmm. The best you can have is an interpretation or an inference, and it's not concrete.
She carries a toy.
There's a lot of
an
people that have
X-Wing
interpreted it this way.
pilot and wears an X-Wing helmet. When she looks at the ship flying away, we can infer that she does want to leave the planet and have some sort of exciting life.
No. Again, this is an inference. You could infer all kinds of stupid shit. That doesn't mean it's actually happening. It's just so she's eating and looking at the horizon. There's a ship flying in the distance.
There's a big connection. Okay, so there's a difference between inference of Luke living on a farm and knowing how to farm, and there's an inference of Rey just looking up at a ship and then wishing that she'd off be on a different planet. You know that, like you can like sit outside an airport. You know when you see those planes going overhead. You don't look. You sometimes just look at a plane and it's like, oh yeah, that's a plane. That's nice. Or you don't just. You're just not always thinking like, oh, there's a plane. I wish I could travel to the far ends of the world someday. It's what?
I don't even remember this scene where she looks into the horizon. We see like that was such a quick scene. Like was she like, oh yeah, it went for 2 seconds. I'm thinking of my parents again. I wonder what they're doing. But I don't really want to think of them. I want to go off like that plane.
I love how Rey doesn't even think. It's like, oh yeah, I took this helmet off a dead pilot. The man who used to wear that thing is dead, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm just wearing it like a hat.
What an odd thing. As you can see from looking at the horizon and this spaceship going up into the air, I don't want to be here anymore. It's like, really? Okay.
Imagine if you went to like an old World War II battlefield, and then you just kind of walked in there and it's like, oh yeah, this soldier had a nice hat, and just takes it off.
This dead corpse.
So given these details, why does she stay on Jakku? Well, highlighting these details, it emphasizes how badly Rey needs her parents. And
this has got nothing to do with Rey being a Mary Sue.
And later on, when Maz has a talk with Rey, she gets exposed even more. Deep down, she already knows that her parents aren't coming back, but she needs them so badly that she's willing to waste her life away just for the slightest possibility of her parents coming back. She is literally in denial when she tells BB-8 that her parents will come back one day. If anything, this dependence on her parents and her insecurities about why she was left on Jakku are a much bigger flaw than anything Luke or Anakin possessed.
That's not a flaw.
No. Okay, Anakin had such big flaws, he fell to the dark side. Luke was so impatient that he didn't finish his training and he ran off unprepared to fight Vader and got his ass handed to him.
If this is such a flaw, how could Orange Lady just remove it from her instantly by saying, yeah, your parents are coming back, kid. Don't worry about it.
And what's even stranger is that this is supposed to be like the ending for Rey's parent arc. Or like she no longer cares at this point, and that's supposed to be her letting go of it. Then almost immediately, the next film, she becomes obsessed with her parents again.
It's so silly. If this is such, like, I've never heard of a story where, we find out her flaw is supposedly a desire for a family.
Yeah, her one flaw, her singular flaw.
And then she just finds some random bar owner and she's like, yeah, no, don't do that anymore. And she's like, oh, I'm going to run away now. Oh, and you're like, oh, flaw's gone. That's not a flaw. That's like, oh, I'm an idiot. I'm going to go cry. I'm embarrassed. Then she gets captured by the First Order because plot.
What up, cunts?
Hello.
Twat.
So apparently, if you don't know it, that Rey's flaw is that she's insecure about validation from external sources. or something.
Yeah. Well, I think, is it Kylo that says that you need to find a father figure in someone for validation? That's not necessarily a flaw.
I know. We know it's not a flaw. That's the problem. We're like,
That's a part of the character, but that's not inherently a negative trait.
And again, this is let's accept that it is a negative trait, and it's a flaw within Rey. What else is there? You can't just have one flaw for an entire character.
well, technically you can, but it has to be relevant. This is just she goes to a bar.
Most in-depth characters will have multiple flaws. Like even if they're a kind of associated, like say, like if someone's selfish, I guess another flaw but kind of associated would be gluttonous, or
Well, I think-
another.
Sorry, I think the more important aspect is that's not a flaw within itself. Now, if it was writing in such a way that Rey seeked the approval of father-like figures like Han Solo or Luke Skywalker, and that affected the plot in a way that got her and her friends in trouble, then that would be a flaw for the character. But as of right now, it's just a part of her personality. It never actually gets her in trouble. She just forms an attachment to people really quickly and then gets upset when, those people either die or disappoint her.
Or
If
in
it
terms
was-
of Kylo Ren, it's like she's too trusting. She has too much of a positive.
Yes, because she goes to see Kylo Ren because she trusts him without, illogically, based on what she knows. But it doesn't actually end up. It's a positive result overall because fucking Snoke dies. So if it was in such a way that she was like seeking the approval of Han Solo and it gets one of her friends captured or killed and there's a negative consequence, then yes, that would be a flaw with the character. It's a character trait that has resulted in a flaw. But her character trait is to trust her character trait is to trust Kylo Ren to be a good guy based on no prior information outside of he injured my friend and killed my adopted father figure, and that results in the leader of the First Order dying.
And then you also, like, if you try and like reflect this over to Luke, let's say if Luke was theoretically, like, if his impulsiveness, that ends up him going to Bespin and getting beaten by Vader, it wouldn't be his impulsiveness wouldn't be a flaw if all of a sudden he ran up to Bespin, he beated Vader, and then he was completely fine and there was no consequences for his actions.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with caring about your friends, but the care for his friends is what gets his hand cut off.
There's no consequences for Rey's flaws, even if it is a flaw.
Yeah, and as a result, Luke has to get saved by his friends as opposed to him wanting to save his friends. So that is a flaw, character flaw within Luke. With Rey, again, it's just a conversation at a bar, and then the plot picks up, and then she gets picked up literally by the First Order to keep the story going. That's it. It's resolved. It's gone. It's done.
Those of you who say it has no flaws, I would strongly ask you to reconsider. Anyway,
So we can easily dismiss his argument there, as we've happily smashed into the ground.
It's not whether I think it's more. It goes further than if the character has a flaw or not. Hell, Mariner in Star Trek Below Decks has a drinking problem that never impacts the plot.
In fact, it often creates the plot.
There's not been. Sorry, I almost said a really bad word there by saying going to and never at the same time. There's never going to be a negative result of that drinking problem, or there hasn't been so far at the very least.
Yeah, if I actually read my comment I left, it was he defined a flaw improperly. He was actually describing Rey's plot or what she wants. So big difference when you're talking about two different writing elements and you screw them up. So easily dismiss that.
anyway, has introduced that people criticize Rey for is her ability to speak to droids. Now, instead of just assuming this is a characteristic of a Mary Sue, ask yourself.
Okay, so this in itself is not a problem. It's So if Rey knew how to speak to droids, I would be fine with that. There are characters in the world that do know how to speak to droids and can understand droids. The problem is that when you stack this up upon, like, it's kind of like skill points. You can put skill points into certain things, but you can't put skill points into everything. And it's almost like she has 20 points in piloting while also having 20 points in scavenging, while having 20 points in engineering, while having 20 points in languages, while having 20 points in this, while having 20 points in that, while having, again, she can speak Wookiee, she can hit everything instantly, she knows how to use the Force, she knows how to do all these abilities that we've never seen before on screen, and they're apparently like the most amazing thing ever. So again, it's the fact it stacks up. You have so many things that she can do out of nowhere with no explanation.
It's not the speaking to droids thing. It's the fact that she's bilingual in the first place when it comes to other languages. So droids I can get, because I imagine there are a lot of droids out where she's living, doing scavenging and doing work. But the language of a race that's near extinct, as in Wookiees, then I'm going to ask questions.
We never see a Wookiee on that entire planet.
I'm still stuck on languages in general. Like, how would she even be taught languages?
And I mean, it extends to other languages as well. She speaks to other creatures on Jakku as well at the same time. And it's more accepting in that way, I guess, because she lives with them. But then it starts popping up everywhere.
Does the sense given what we are shown? Well, she is an engineer, and she
No, she isn't.
She's not. She's a scavenger.
Parts, especially with droids. Wouldn't it make sense that she would have learned to understand droids at some point?
Again, there's no evidence.
She's not an engineer. She's a scavenger, and she's not an engineer of droids. She's a scavenger of starships.
These are, when you scavenge things, they are broken. They are not fixed. They're not working.
Yeah, it's not like okay, there's a big difference between putting things together and fixing them and ripping them apart.
Yeah, if
all
she
you need
had
to be is a scavenger. It's like, oh look, I know this thing in this wall is like really it'll give me a lot of money. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rip it out of this wall and I'm going to go over here and sell it.
I can probably disassemble a boiler. I can't build one.
Right. If she had a
if
working
any of you have
droid,
ever taken apart like a computer, I was working as like an IT technician's office, IT support, and they said they didn't have anything for me to do, so they just sat a laptop down on my desk while I was doing my work experience and said, "Oh look, okay, take this apart and put it back together." I'll tell you, I didn't. There was a couple of things left over when I put that thing together. That just does a lot of things.
Now here's the thing: if she's supposedly she was raised by the Simon Pegg character on Jakku, right?
Uncar
or sold to her.
Uncar Putt.
Yeah, who also owns the Millennium Falcon. All you'd need is a line or two of him saying, "Here, take this box of scrap. The landing gear on my ship is broken again. Go fix it." And then it implies that he owns a ship. He gets Rey to run it in exchange for, I don't know, food and lodgings or something. And then it can be revealed later that the ship he owns is actually the Millennium Falcon, and she's been rebuilding it piece by piece.
That would do it.
Leopold has also got a good point. It's like we have real life scavengers. They have no clue what each part does, but they know if it looks shiny, it probably fetches a couple $.
Yeah, based on the element, like the aluminum or whatever metal is expensive that day. So, again, if she had a droid, a functioning droid in her house that she talked to and we saw a conversation, we'd be like, oh, she built the droid or she has the droid. She obviously talked to it. That's her only friend or whatever. We get it. Because right now, she is pretty much like Castaway, living by herself, doesn't associate with anyone for whatever reason. Yet she knows stuff. And we're like, how does she know stuff? There's no books. There's no computers. There's nothing.
I feel like communicating with droids would be something pretty important to know how to do if you're going to be an engineer in this Star Wars universe. So her understanding droids makes perfect sense to me.
No, it
now,
doesn't.
I will say that her being able to understand Wookiees is a little
because engineers work in like different areas. You can have someone who like works with droids, someone who works with ships, someone like an architect who works with buildings, or I don't know, an engine. There are so many aspects of it.
An engineer might mean that she rebuilds that little speeder that she has. That doesn't mean she can speak to droids.
Maybe she's like a civil engineer and she makes like really ergonomic chairs.
Yes. The fact that she can strip a Star Destroyer for parts proves she's an engineer, which therefore proves she can speak to droids.
I think the word he's looking for is not engineer; it's mechanic.
Yeah, but even then, there's a lot of generosity within that through line of logic.
Yes.
So here's Neil. Thank you, Neil. Rey should have been a mechanic with a specialty in droids, and her flaws is her being selfish and closed off. It would have fixed a lot of her issues. Yep, that would have done it. I mean, it sounds pretty much like Anakin as a kid, but that's fine.
Think of it this way. Using real-life logic, I am able to disassemble a yacht, therefore I must be an engineer for cars and so know how to understand HTML script for website coding.
No, you scavenge parts of a big warship.
Of an oil tanker.
Yes.
And therefore I must be able to rebuild a bicycle, and that means I can understand CSS.
It's not even that. It's like that means that you can fix a cargo freighter or something.
Well, it's
like
going from a very low skill with low intelligence that implies one with high skill and high intelligence. So you don't do that. You go the opposite direction. If you're an engineer, you can sweep the dirt outside with a broom. Yes. You can't sweep dirt outside with a broom and say, oh, this person's clearly a PhD in physics. You know, it's like, no, it's not how it works. Here is Mr. Taker 610. Thank you, sir. Droids are man-made. Why give them a language?
Binary.
Yeah.
Binary is technically a language, but it's because you obviously can't give straight codes. But I understand what he's talking about. He's talking about actual language. And I would probably say that even though it's not in the film, there's probably some explanation you can make for why R2 can't talk normally like C-3PO can.
Oh, here we go. Bogue. Thank you, Bogue. This is great for me. Rey is an isekai protagonist. Sequels make sense now. Yeah, she got reincarnated as an overpowered character in a video game fantasy world. And she put all her points into, she put all her points to everything, I guess. She had like 3,000 points. And all of her skills in her status window were hidden. She had no idea she could do all these things.
For one, why would Wookiees be on Jakku for an extended period of time?
Why would they
die
do
of
that
heat exhaustion like immediately. And even if they were there for a little bit, it would be pretty hard to learn an entire language just like that, especially like the ones Wookiees speak. But isn't this just as ridiculous as Han knowing how to speak Wookiee in Solo?
Yes.
So if it's ridiculous for Rey, then it's just as ridiculous for Han.
I agree.
But anyway...
Yeah, but you're looking at the Han Solo film specifically, and you're trying to apply that to Han Solo's entire character. And yes, we do say that that's stupid in that film, but that doesn't mean it's stupid in A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back and all the other ones.
Exactly.
Because he's been friends with them for such a long period of time.
Yeah,
if I was friends with a French person, or if I was, just friends with a French person, and I saw them every day and they only spoke French, I would have to pick up some French in order to communicate with them.
Well, especially if your introduction was, hello, I'm Shiny, and this is my best friend and right-hand man, Le Chief. And then you would be like, okay, so they must be able to understand each other despite the language barrier. The fact that Han Solo happened to know Wookiee just at base is the bit that's wrong. It would have been better in the Solo film if they'd had a language barrier that they had to get over during the film. And you are completely correct. It's ridiculous for Rey, just like it's ridiculous for Han in the Solo film. I don't understand the criticism here.
It's also Disney Star Wars with Disney Star Wars, but
he seems to be agreing, though. He seems to be agreeing that this is a problem.
Chewie is intent on eating Solo Han, and he's like, okay, Chewie understands basic or regular talk English. He understands that, and then Han Solo pleads for his life in English. Chewie says, "No, I'm still going to eat you." And then the moment he starts speaking in Wookiee, it's like, "Oh, look, I'm not going to eat you."
Just like the idea that the fact that he could understand English and Han's plead for his life fell on deaf ears anyway.
Also, Chewie now eats people.
This is pretty much Chewie's Martha moment. He's like, "Oh, you say word in language is good. Like, I will not kill you now." It's like, what? Okay, thank you.
Chewie now eats people in canon.
I'm okay
Yeah.
with that, to be perfectly honest.
He eats
He's
people.
hungry.
He's a hungry boy.
Here's John
But
Lemley.
yes, you are absolutely correct. What's this guy's name?
The Goldman.
Yes, you are correct, Goldman. It is ridiculous Rey can understand Wookiee, just like it's ridiculous that Han Solo in the Solo film just happens to know Wookiee.
Here's John Lumley. Guys, I played with plastic knives in my attic with some of my friends, so I must be able to create a nuclear weapon. Yeah, I know. You're amazing.
Yep.
And Taker610 again. Makes more sense for Han. He more well-traveled. Yeah, well, he grew up in the slums, and I'm sure he encountered many characters. Whether he learned a language is
But
questionable.
it's kind of out of nowhere. It's not set up, and there's no reason to explain why he knows that language in the film. It's just he knows it on the spot. It saves his life.
Either way, he's agreeing that this is bad. I'm like, yeah, you're right. This is bad, regardless of the movie. So let's keep going.
You know, I'll even go as far as saying in the Solo film, they have made him a Gary Stew.
Yes, I would agree.
You go. Here is your best argument for why Rey would be a Mary Sue.
This is the best argument. This is
Okay,
this is like a low down tier.
Oh, okay, 1 second. I think we on the spot could come up with a lot more reasons about why she's a Mary Sue. Again, her force ability for one.
It's perhaps one of the straws that breaks the camel's back, but it's definitely not the only one.
It's certainly not the strongest. So it's a strange thing. It's like, oh, how could she possibly know Wookiee? It's like, how could she possibly learn droid? It's the same
How could she
argument.
possibly learn the Force so quickly?
How could she beat everyone up with a stick?
How could she possibly fly a ship that's never flown in years?
How could she fix it? How could she know how to remove the compressor? How could she know?
If she's never been on the ship, how would she know how to do that?
Again,
Or where the compressor is even located?
If you rip something, okay, let's say if I installed a brand new device or some kind of component on my computer, if I suddenly ripped out my RAM cards, it wouldn't make it work better. In fact, it would damage the whole motherboard and everything. It would damage the RAM cards.
It questions what the heck is a compressor on an ignition line?
A fuel pump. Okay, so it's implying that there is something between the fuel and the compressing the fuel, I think is what they're implying. And it's a compressor is like a physical component. It's not a circuit board. As in, it's physically a machine which is going and doing something to force something down. It's inferring that it's with fuel, so it's a whole load of nonsense that she rips a circuit board out, and it's like, oh look, it works. We've gone over this before on another Smudcast. I remember talking about it in great detail.
Here's John Lumley with another great reference. You can learn Wookiee by eating noodles in the rain. Oh. Makes you want to go watch the classics, doesn't it? Of course, we don't have Evan Monroe to tell us that. So, anyway.
Now, let's move on to Rey fighting some thugs. As I said earlier, given the situation that she lives in, I think it makes perfect sense that Rey would learn how to defend herself. However, some people would disagree with me, and that's okay. However, my biggest problem that I have with people who questions Rey's ability to do certain things is the ridiculous double standard that she is held to. Rey is the only character that I see in fiction whose every trait is questioned. Literally no one else.
Gee, I wonder why.
She has so many.
What's wrong with
I'm completely open to the idea that she lives on this backwater planet with all these shady characters. She will have learned at some point to defend herself with a crude stick.
You can have some of these traits if you explain them. You cannot have all of these traits in this situation, with this specific character. If you were introducing a Jedi who had already been trained, you know what? Go with that, because then that means there's a reason of why they can do these things already. But we're actively starting off at the beginning of this character's journey. This is where they start their learning and growth to become a Jedi.
If she had some hidden backstory that, you know, she lost her master and her master closed off her memory to keep her alive or whatever, kind of like what LiteratureDevil was talking about in his various rewrites. But like, oh, that makes sense. There's some force power to close off the mind, and she's picking it up as she goes, and she's relearning things that she already knew.
That's what they did in Jedi Fallen Order. Cal hadn't used the Force for so long that he had to relearn everything.
See? Simple stuff.
Does this with any character in Star Wars that was created before Disney bought the franchise. Princess Leia knows how to shoot a blaster better than stormtroopers.
Yeah, political royalty. How could she possibly learn how to fire a gun?
A gun is pretty simple. It's point
Also,
and shoot.
Just want to say that in this situation...
I like that he has a clip of her shooting the gun and clearly missing.
But in this situation, the stormtroopers are told to not kill them, to let them escape. They have to miss. They are told to miss.
How does this make sense? Well, she's in the original trilogy, so no one is going to criticize her. Padme Amidala knows how to use blasters better than battle droids. How does she know how to do this? Well, she was...
You can have characters with these traits. The problem is that she has so many positive traits and no negative ones.
She pulls out a personal gun she keeps on her person. I think it's safe to assume if she's carrying that around, she's used it at some point. She didn't just pick a random one up like Leia did, and Leia missed.
I think she hits one of the stormtroopers. One.
Not in the clip he showed.
Yeah, not in the clip he showed, but I think I remember her at least hitting one.
If I pulled out a knife, if I was in a film, I pulled out a knife, you would assume that I carry around a knife for the sole reason that I know how to use that knife. Just like we assume that Rey carries around that stick, and thus we assume she knows how to use it. She's not just carrying it around for the laugh.
Okay, so I'm going to pull out this equipment, and I don't know how to use it at all.
Yeah, not know how to use it. And like I said, for the contrast of Leia, she grabbed a gun, so she had something to defend herself with, because even if you didn't have experience shooting a gun, you'd probably want one on you in that scenario. And she doesn't, she's not very good with it.
I'll admit, again, these are inferences, but these are stronger influences than... inferences. These are stronger inferences than, you know, Rey looked at a ship or Rey looked at a person. We're actually looking at something which is in the film that a character possesses. You know, it's inferred that, you know, Han Solo knows how to use a ship because it's his. It's like there's much easier connections to make than these other connections which he was making before.
This is my ship, the Millennium Falcon. I have no idea how to fly.
It's been sat here for the last 20 years.
This is my companion, Chewbacca. I have no idea how to speak to him.
Here's Taker 610. Everyone in Star Wars has a universal language translator. I think there's one in Star Trek. I think there's one in Babylon 5. I don't think there's one in
How come
Star
Finn
Wars.
doesn't know how to speak to Chewie?
Yeah, I don't think I don't think people in Star Wars have a universal translator. I don't.
This isn't like Doctor.
Everyone has a the main language of the universe is basic, and you have to learn other languages in order to understand them and speak them.
Besides, if that was true, Luke doesn't know how to speak to Chewie when he first meets him, and Finn doesn't know how to speak to Chewie when he first meets him.
Here is
I'm fairly
Bogan.
sure there's definitely more examples. Why do you think C-3PO exists? He's a translator droid. Why would he need to exist if everyone had a translator?
Yeah, there's many points where he's having to translate for the Ewoks, or he's having to translate for other people.
Here's Bogue. A blind person could shoot better than battle droids and stormtroopers and just about everything else on the Imperial side of things. Yeah, so...
And again, we're talking about Princess Leia picking up a gun, not being very good at using it, and she's going up against people who are trying to let them get away.
Created by George Lucas and not Disney, so it's okay. Rey knows how to fight with the staff. How does she know how to do this? well, she must
Okay,
be a Mary
no.
Sue.
Oh, so he's saying that because it's made by George Lucas, it's okay. Have you seen like Red Letter Media's criticisms of the Phantom Menace? I mean,
Well,
like
I
lots of
think
people
the
very
big
heavily
point is-
criticize the prequels.
I don't know anyone that thinks Rey's a Mary Sue based on this scene alone.
Yeah, it's always everything else.
We've seen her enough in the film with that stick to assume she knows how to use it to some degree, and she's going up against two like thugs who are unarmed. It's entirely plausible.
Yeah. Here is Taker 610. That was tongue-in-cheek, guys. Haha. Okay. Thank you.
Listen, you piece of shit.
You're fucking wrong.
Sorry to say this, Taker 610, but you're watching movies wrong.
Sue. Luke knows how to be an expert pilot. How can he do this? Well, he says numerous times that he's a pilot, so it's okay. So
Yes, that's called setting something up.
Not only does he
Something
say
films
it,
do. If they set up Luke being a pilot, oh, he's a pilot later on.
Ben is aware of it as well. So he's like, oh, people around the community know this guy who's really good at flying. He talks about his father being a good pilot. It's like, okay.
That's why they go to the cantina to find Han Solo, not because neither of them know how to fly a ship. It's because they need someone to smuggle them on a ship that can be obscured.
Then he
I don't
talks
think it's that
about
they need a pilot.
Yeah, they talk about the T-16, or when they're talking about bombing the Death Star. He's like, well, I can hit
I can fly one of these.
Womp Rats with my T-16 back at home.
Isn't that the same for Anakin in I haven't seen the prequels in a long time. Is there anything like that for Anakin and the pod racing, or does that kind of come out of the blue?
The only reason we're given for why he can fly an N1 starfighter is because pod racing.
But has he done pod racing before?
Yes.
He's never won, though.
They say that he's done pod racing, but he's never won.
Which makes does that make sense? Because Watto is big on the pod racing scene.
Yeah. So
I don't know why Watto would be happy with his slaves pretty much doing a very dangerous sport, almost committing suicide.
Yeah,
it's a more tenuous connection, but it's a connection nonetheless.
See, they could have made those scenes, like the pod racing scene, more believable if the pods were actually safe, like there was a safety precaution so no one died. We're talking about a kid potentially dying, okay? You want to make some believability, because we know this is going to be Darth Vader. You know he's not going to die, but at least give us some sort of like bubble or protective idea that not every scenario is this death scenario, but we're like the audience going, haha, we know he's not going to die. It sort of levels the playing field when everyone is sort of on the same safety level, and you can still go crazy with explosions and skids and all sorts of other crazy animations that you want to make it fun and exciting. So if they had more scenarios where it's like, okay, we got to protect young Anakin from the horrors of the galaxy, then that's great. When you see his arm get chopped off and this and that's, like, okay, great, that's good, because you want to see him be weak, because you know he's going to become the big baddie at the end. So you want to see slowly get up there, not just, oh, you're going to die. It's possible.
It's very strange that he's bringing up like a lot of these arguments up first, I think, because these are not the main argument. Like when people mainly pull up the arguments that raise a Mary Sue, the examples are given force powers, beating Kylo Ren, and all these other things, but it's not generally the beginning of the film, which is establishing a lot of a character. That isn't the problem. What the problem is everything after that. Everything after the opening, that's the problem.
If Rey
Here's a tip for people who are defending Star Wars films. If your counter to me saying something in this trilogy is bad is to point out how that bad thing is also in another trilogy of the same series, perhaps your defense for the franchise is fucking terrible. It's like, hey, this bad thing is in this film as well, and I go, yes. So where does the conversation go from there? You've not so much like repaired the hole I've shot in the boat. I've gone, hey, that's a bad hole in the boat, we're sinking. And you go, well, fuck you, and you shot a hole in another side of the boat, and now we're just sinking twice as fast.
Oh, I don't even think it's sinking fast because again, the hole was already there in the first place by the film. It's like saying, "Oh, well, you have a hole," and just draws us a hole. Just get a little marker pen and just do a little squiggle.
Film that she knows how to fight. Would this solve everything? Have you ever heard the phrase "show don't tell"?
Here we
We
go.
are told many times in A New Hope that Luke is a great pilot, but we are never shown this until the ending battle.
Where they show it.
So
they show him being a good pilot when they show him being a
So you're
good
saying that
pilot.
they're setting something up and then they show the payoff. Really? That's amazing. It's called a story.
I admit that it would be better if earlier on in the film you saw Luke's piloting, but I don't think the budget and the like not only does I think it wouldn't work within like the storytelling and what scene you'd have to force him to actually have a piloting scene, but you can. A confusion about show don't tell is how do I
The reason why we have this statement in writing class is we want the author to show us the elements of a character's persona or skill set, as opposed to just saying, like a Mary Sue. This is Mary Sue from the deepest realm of the dark roads, and she has been festering for thousands of years, training her. Like talking about a story, as opposed to showing us the story. We want to see this powerful character.
It's not like Luke just turned up and he was like, "Oh, we're doing a raid on the Death Star with these X-wings," and he just hopped in one and said, "Oh yeah, I'm really good at these." It's like we were given plenty of warning about this. The same way we were given plenty of warning when it came to Rey holding a stick that's like some kind of staff or pole, and we go, she probably uses that in some way, either offensively or defensively. And then that question is answered.
It's essentially any Chekhov's gun you set up or show. It's like, what's that thing on the wall? What's that skill set? What's that thing you keep talking about? Oh, you're scared of spiders? Boom! There's a spider in the next scene. That's fantastic. So you have to do these things. You don't just use information and drop it.
I think the way he's going with this is that he's saying that Luke didn't. All they were doing was telling you that Luke was good at piloting. Well, here in the sequel trilogy, they show you that Rey is good at everything. I think that's the way he's trying to go for it, because he's making the show don't tell, and he's going to say, well, the sequel trilogy shows that Rey is good at this, rather than telling you.
And what are Luke's skills? He's good at piloting, and he can shoot womp rats that are 2 meters wide. I think that's about it.
And then he gets his ass handed to him throughout the entirety of the rest of the trilogy until it comes to like Return of the Jedi. Even then, it's only the mercy of his father that saves him in the end.
Right, and those are skills that he's actually good at. Like I guess talking to droids is not like he's not completely fluent or this or that. So those are the two things. It's like, all right, he's a fighter pilot, and that's about it.
Shows us she's a fighter on a few occasions, but when she can hold...
Again, she destroys Finn, who's supposedly a trained fighter from birth. So whether or not that's part of his character, like he's a scaredy cat, or he's not very good at fighting, or he doesn't like fighting anymore, he's traumatized, that's beside the point. There should have been some more development if that was the case.
It's all just a mess.
Up her own against Kylo Ren, she's a Mary Sue? Now, don't worry, I have much more to say about the fight when we get there later. The point I'm trying to make is that not every skill set that a character has needs to be thoroughly explained. Sometimes, in order to make a more compelling and exciting film, characters will know how to do things that may not make sense given their backstory.
Oh boy.
Again, you can have some of these. You can have some. You can't have all. You can't have all of them. It's points. It's skill points. The whole skill points thing. You can have some points here, but you can't have 20s in everything.
You need sufficient evidence to explain someone's behavior. You could assume that a mechanic can know how to hotwire and fix problems or patches or this or that. Would they be able to fix a ship they've never flown before, or let alone know how to fly a ship she's never been on before? Probably not. There's many things that, because there's so many skills that she has, it's like, how did she do all this? And if the argument is Uncle Ungar or the Force did it, you're really not helping anything. You're just saying the Force that be stuff happened in her past. We don't know what. Go with it. It's like, no, we can't. It's a strange thing to say. Some characters in some stories just pull things out of their ass. You have to accept it to make it an interesting story. That's a really silly thing to say. If I just pull out a machete out of nowhere and start defeating my enemies, it's like, what? Did you always have that? Why were you waiting? Was that your secret weapon? Why did you do that?
I think that when it comes to Luke's piloting ability, not only do I think narratively, it still works fine as a setup. Again, what show don't tell is it's the important elements, and it's more in focus on the narrative and the story that's happening. His piloting ability is not really relevant until the end, and it's still setting something up for later. And it doesn't set up everything. It doesn't set up Luke being a good mechanic, and also, I heard you're a good mechanic and a pilot, and I say you're also good with a stick, and you're getting really strong now. You work at muscle. I also hear this, that, and the other. It's not that. It's not like he has all the abilities. He only has a couple, and those abilities are still set up early in the film.
Leia a princess, but George Lucas wanted to make Leia not a usual damsel in distress, so he made her have some kind of skill with a blaster. Lucas wanted...
Did she have a skill with the blaster?
She points and shoots. That's what she does.
I think that was out of necessity, and she was frustrated with these two guys not doing their things they should be doing.
If you give anyone a blaster or give anyone a gun, they could shoot it, and the skill is in hitting. And with a blaster as well, there isn't as much recoil, so you don't have to worry about a pushback from this weapon. Which
and it looks like she's mostly doing suppression fire. She's not like aiming to kill specifically. She just wants to get the hell out of there.
She shoots a grate, and it blows open.
Yeah.
Padme to have an active role in taking back Naboo, so he made her good with the blaster as well. Neither of these skills are explained, but they don't have to be. If you want to read something...
They don't have to be because they're not necessary. We get it.
He's latching too much onto that in order to be... the idea of what makes a Mary Sue is that their traits are not explained. I'd say that's more of a symptom of a Mary Sue. Or they have traits which are contradictory. It's one of the aspects. It's a symptom, but it's not the cause of the Mary Sue. You can still explain.
Let's say
if you use the Force dyad, or that Rey's the daughter of Palpatine, in order to explain how powerful Rey is. It doesn't fix the issue that she's a Mary Sue, because all these things are still happening. Just because they're explained doesn't mean she stops being a Mary Sue.
Let's say she has all these skills, but she's not an expert at all of them, or especially with force power, she's not a master at the second attempt. I could say, you know what? She's a survivalist. She picked up everything, and she doesn't know, because she picked up everything. She's a jack of all trades. So it's like, all right. That means she's not the best in every scenario, but she can get by. That would be like the kind of logical, if I was, surviving on my own in a foreign land and I had to pick up skills and language, that would be like, okay, I can sort of talk to droids. I can sort of talk this and that. I can sort of repair whatever. I can get by. That would be fine. But she doesn't just get by. She does everything very, very well. If not, like, she defeats two guys with a stick as well as Finn. She repairs that problem with the Falcon.
The thing is that there is no consequence of narratively. The larger part, I think, is more that there are no consequences. That there are no struggles for her. That she never has to work for anything, and it's just given to her. Like, I can just lift rocks.
Well, that's another issue entirely. If you're talking about the game analogy you gave before, Shiny, then she had points into everything, but she had like 60 points, and she had like 2 in each, So she slowly learned and experienced hardships and gained natural skills in those things. But she's not an expert in any. That would make so much more sense. Be like, why does she know everything? Oh, then maybe she's a mechanic. Maybe she learned from... But we still need that source of knowledge where the original skill set came from, and whether or not she's just lazy or she's just like really struggling to survive.
something where skill a character has is explained, then go to Wikipedia. Movies are there to tell a story, not to provide a bibliography of every character.
I'm sorry,
Of course,
No
this
one's
doesn't mean that
saying
a
it has
character
to
can...
be. Literally, no one is saying it has to be a bibliography. You just need to explain certain aspects of a character.
You're telling me in order to appreciate a story, I have to go away from the thing that is actively explaining things to me as to who these people are and what they can do, and look up Wikipedia so I can find out more information. That is your defense. I have to go away from the film to understand the characters and their
Well,
talents.
he's saying that if you want to know how they got their talents, go to Wikipedia. And that's his explanation.
Go to a third party. This is very strange because he made the argument that we shouldn't be using deleted scenes or third party sources in the beginning.
Oh no, he's not using it as an argument. He's more saying, well, if you want to know like how these characters got these traits, go to third party material.
As if that's the only way to understand how these characters got their traits, as opposed to...
You can still do this narratively. You can still...
No, hang on. This guy's been provided... This guy's provided his own example of when this doesn't happen anyway, with Rey and the stick, and that she's carrying it around in Jakku, and then it stands to reason that she can fight off these two unarmed thugs, and we're like, yes. I don't know anyone who would disagree with that. Just like the whole... I understand you're quite a good pilot too, Luke. And then we find out he is in fact a good pilot, and Obi-Wan Kenobi was correct. Those are examples where it was explained to us and we didn't have to go to Wikipedia. So...
Well, it's explaining through strong connections and inferences. Inferences you can make about the story. Again, what we were saying before with the blasters... and the stick. We didn't need a Wikipedia article about how she learned how to use a stick. We're not asking for a whole explanation. We're pointing out things which don't make any logical sense at all. And again, there are just so many traits. Like, why is he so focused? He spent 20 minutes on trying to explain like the first part of the film. We haven't even gotten to Force abilities yet. And he's so stuck on like the idea that a Mary Sue is just a character which you can't explain. That there is no explanation for their abilities. It's like, no, that's not a Mary Sue at all. It's the whole world bending around them aspect. The fact that they don't face consequences.
Know how to do anything and it will make sense. But if there is reasonable doubt that the circumstance that a character is in lends them to probably having a certain skill, then it probably doesn't need to be explained. Leia is part of a galactic rebellion, so it would make sense that she can use a blaster. She doesn't need to say randomly that she had training when she was younger.
She's not
Rey
part
lives
of the
on a
rebellion
planet filled with thugs.
Leia is part of... Yeah, she's the Princess of Alderaan, but she's still a rebel. She's part of the rebellion.
Is she?
Yes?
Okay, I'm wrong on that one. I thought she was a custodian. I didn't think that necessarily meant she was part of the Rebel Alliance.
No, she was always part of the Rebel Alliance.
She was the princess of a planet that is aligned with the rebellious systems.
No, she's active within the rebellion.
Okay.
Even in the beginning of the film, it says, you're part of the Rebel Alliance and a traitor. Send her away.
That's them accusing her. That doesn't necessarily mean it's true.
Oh no, she is, because she has the Death Star plans in the first place, which were stolen by the rebels.
So it makes sense that she knows how to defend herself. So that is my point on people having a certain skill set that is not explained. Not all, but certain skill sets do not need to be explained. So after Rey beats up the thugs, she sees Finn and goes after him because he supposedly stole Poe's jacket. Now there are a few things I want to mention during their first encounter with each other. The first is something really stupid, but I'm going to address it. I've actually seen people make the argument that Rey being able to knock Finn down is another example of her being a Mary Sue, because Finn is a trained soldier and she isn't. Like, bro,
yes.
He is currently unarmed and a girl who we just saw beat up a bunch of thugs a second ago is running after him. Not to mention she's also in possession of the droid he is looking for. It's not really in Finn's character to just beat her up and take BB-8 for himself. Also, when she hit him, it was completely by surprise. If Mike Tyson was casually walking down the street, I could walk up behind.
That was chasing after him completely by surprise.
No,
She cuts in front of him because she knows the layout of this market better than him, so she knows how to get in front and knock him off his feet ahead of him.
He's running in a straight line. How does she... Like, cutting off implies that they're taking the long route and, a short route, but he's walking in a line. That's the fastest route you could possibly have. And then
She cuts in through the side of the building, so she obviously knew a different way, and it's a big
but
open
he's
market.
running in a straight line, though. He's not running about the place. He's just running straight.
I thought in the clip he dashes between all the market stalls.
So, I could swear that it's just him running in a straight line, but it's a long time since I watched it. But here, is he trying to say that he could beat up Mike Tyson or something?
Well, let's just get to the super chat first. Punished Berserker. Oh man, I missed Jill's reaction to his Rey's a mechanic, therefore she's an engineer, therefore she can speak Python binary fluently. Yeah, I know, it's fantastic. I know hopscotch, therefore I can do long jump. It's amazing.
him and knock him with a baseball bat and knock him down no problem. He would proceed to get up and beat the living daylight out of me, but that's not the point. So yeah, the fact that people see this as an example...
I have strong doubts about that. I really do. I don't think he could. I don't.
First of all, Mike, in your analogy, Mike Tyson is apparently unprepared for you coming to hit him in the face. Finn is well aware of someone chasing him right now.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this either implies that Finn's a moron.
And also, comparing Finn to Mike Tyson, they're completely different characters.
Well, in terms physically, I assume you're talking about.
Well, mentally as well, I don't think.
Well, no, because he's talking about fighting comparisons. So that's more about physical strength and combat. And they're both people who I don't know. It's kind of a really stupid hill for him to die on, to be honest.
Of a Mary Sue is baffling. Another thing I want to mention is this scene also shows that Rey is too trusting. She believes that Finn is a resistance fighter without really...
That's what I was talking about before. The trait of being too trusting is another trait of Mary Sue. They're too good. It's too much goodness. They're too trusting.
And it doesn't actually get her in any trouble. Well, I say that. There are no negative results in the sense that she trusting someone actually causes her to lose something. Mm-hmm. Yes, she has to flee Jakku because the First Order thinks she's with Finn, and she ends up being with Finn anyway, so that's a dead end anyway, but she's got nothing to lose from leaving Jakku. She's not leaving anything behind. So it's not a loss for her.
Even questioning him. Finn could have easily been a First Order spy that would inevitably find out the location of the Resistance base. You could argue that the First Order wouldn't be sending...
They're not going... What?
Finn doesn't want to go to the Resistance base. He wants to get away from the First Order.
He says he's with the Resistance, so they can escape together and get away from the First Order. He doesn't care about the map to Luke. He cares about getting away, and the first chance he does, he gets away. He runs off.
TIE fighters to kill their own spy, but it's not the first time a squadron of TIE fighters was sent out to give the impression that they were trying to destroy the Falcon. Now this is a small point, but the larger point I wanted to make is the line, Luke Skywalker, I thought he was a myth.
Luke Skywalker? I thought he was a myth.
This line holds credence to the notion that Rey knows about the Jedi and the powers they possess.
But she thinks they're a myth, so she doesn't think they're real.
This is just, I heard some story back in the day, and she thought it was a myth. It says nothing about what she knows about the myth or what is true or false.
I really wish in my conversations I had alcohol.
We're showing a scene in which Rey basically lets the audience know she has no idea how the Force works.
Yeah. After the fact.
He's showing a scene right now where Luke has to explain that the Force is not a thing that lifts rocks, even though The Last Jedi then shows that is basically all it's good for.
This is further proved when Han talks to them about the Jedi later on in the Falcon. This will also
Han's the
tie into
person
her
she
using the
knows,
Jedi
Luke's
mind
the
trick, but
person
we'll
she
talk
thought was
about
a
that
myth.
more when we get there. So after Rey and Finn meet, the First Order finds them and they are forced to leave Jakku. And now we get to Rey flying the Falcon. By the way, I already made a video on Rey flying the Falcon, so I'm basically going to be repeating the same points I made in that video.
Good for you.
First, let's discuss her backstory again, because this argument that her backstory doesn't fit her skill set is, again, completely unfair. In her introduction, we learn a few things. For one, she's a scavenger.
Okay,
You
so
said she was a mechanic.
she's not an engineer then. Which one is she?
You said she was an engineer earlier, so...
No. Okay, in this case, he's right that she's a scavenger and not an engineer. Yeah.
So, do you think he'd go back and amend what he said earlier about understanding droids?
No, but
Well-
but I don't have a problem with him saying that she's an engineer because she is one. Oh, not an engineer. Fuck, a scavenger. Sorry, shut up.
Well, in his mind, scavenger implies engineering skills, so, same thing.
Yeah,
She
he's
digs-
definitely implying that. It's just. Yeah,
Did you know dumpster diving makes you a nuclear physicist? Like, no, I didn't know I did. No, that's cool.
The starter store looking for parts. Now it appears that she is looking for specific parts, considering she remembers how many portions she got for a specific part like a week ago.
1/2 portion.
Last
How do
week
you
they
not-
were a half portion each.
How do you not know that he put out a thing saying, hey, if you find this blinking red thing with, like, green wires, I will give you 3 portions for them. So she went to a Star Destroyer in search of that part.
It doesn't show understanding of components. He knows that it's a shiny thing.
Yeah, it's just market forces. If you get this thing, I'll give you double. It's like, okay.
And what if, she could have gone there a week earlier and picked one up by chance, brought it back, and he said, hey, that's actually rather valuable. And she goes, oh shit, I'll go back to the same place I found the last one next time and see if I can get any more.
Here's Spanish Berserker. How and when the fuck did Rey hear about Luke on a planet even more remote than Tatooine?
And by the way, that fucking makes no sense that she looks at a random part in a Star Destroyer and goes, oh yes, that's worth 5 portions.
He's probably
How would
just...
she be able to... What is the metric?
Yeah, he's probably being stingy at this point, I think. Just because he's a bad guy. So he's going to say mean things. Maybe if he was a bit more nicer about it, he's like, no, this is totally the actual daily price of that thing, right? Don't worry about it. I can't do anything.
And later on, she does do a decent job fixing the Falcon. So as we
ship
said
she's never
earlier, we
been
can
on.
logically infer that she has a strong engineering background.
Again,
No.
all she does is, oh fuck, I accidentally moved.
God damn it, Shiny. It was like 21 minutes.
Yeah. Fuck, I've already forgotten. Yeah, okay, ripping something out of a wall again is not fixing it. You don't rip out RAM cards of computers and it all of a sudden just works.
You called her a scavenger because she knows parts that are worth certain amounts, even though there's like multiple
Engineer.
ways.
He's calling her an engineer.
No, but he started off calling her a scavenger because she knows the value of certain parts and their portion equivalent. Therefore, she must know how to rip out mechanics of the Millennium Falcon, a ship she's never been on or flown.
Well, that's the thing. She
And that
has
makes her an
flown
engineer.
other ships, but we're talking about
Can
other...
we go back and follow the through line of logic?
Of what?
Well, I think we already are behind.
Yeah.
where we were
Because
before.
this argument that her backstory doesn't fit her skill
wanna
set is,
clarify.
again, completely unfair. In her introduction, we learn a few things. For one, she's a scavenger. She digs through the starter store looking for parts. Now it appears that she is looking for specific parts, considering she remembers how many portions she got for a specific part like a week ago.
1/2 portion.
Last week they were a half portion each.
And later on, she does do a decent job fixing the Falcon. So as we said earlier, we can logically infer that
Those
she
are
has a
two
strong
different
engineering background.
subjects.
But as I said earlier, for whatever reason, Rey is the only character where every skill she has needs to be put into question. Remember how people were okay with Luke flying because many people said he was a good pilot?
Hang on.
Well, Rey herself says she's a pilot numerous times.
That was two different things.
But she's a Mary Sue?
No. She doesn't say she's a pilot numerous times. When asked why is she a good pilot, she says she doesn't know. Then show me a point in the film where she says she's got a good pilot, other than 12.
Can we focus more on the fact that she recognizes certain parts are worth a certain amount, and then we see that she can disassemble parts of the Falcon, therefore she's a good engineer? As if those two are linked in some way?
But the only of it's like moving on to the point he's making now, he's talking about he says, oh well, Rey is established earlier in the film that she's a good pilot. Okay, seconds before they actually go on the ship, Finn says, how are we going to fly that? We need a pilot. And Rey goes, we've got one. And he's like, but...
And she also refers to the Falcon as garbage that hasn't flown in years.
Okay, yeah, but the thing is about, like, Luke, you can see a ship behind him, a ship he's playing with a little model of. That's very... Like, in the terms of context of Jakku, she wouldn't be flying. In fact, we know she hasn't been flying because she's just sitting there without a ship. What ship would she have flown? She doesn't own a ship.
It's after the fact she says, I've flown ships before, but never out of orbit, or whatever the line was. So the thing is, flying other ships of different makes are very different than flying a spaceship of another make entirely. So it's like...
That's also after the fact as well. Yeah. You can't say that Luke is a good pilot after you've just kind of pulled his piloting abilities out of your ass.
Well, what's good about this scene right here is that everyone's in awe of what just happened. She has no idea how she did it. Finn has no idea because she says, no one trained you? He actually says this line. And no! Like, so it's like affirming, yes, I'm a Mary Sue, yes. Like, yeah, okay, we get it.
And she's going up against smaller, faster, deadlier ships that are flown by, trained pilots. And she's using a ship that has not only sat stationary for 30 years, that she's never been on and requires a co-pilot.
Well, she requires someone to man the turrets at least. So it's and the turret is busted. And then, so
she also flies it much better than Han Solo ever did.
She does 2 or 3 maneuvers that are really impressive. So it's like, okay. And he's going to make the argument that everyone seems to be able to fly and drive in the Star Wars universe. It seems to be okay. Everyone can do it.
Finn can't. Finn can't. It's established that he needs a pilot.
I can drive a car. I can't drive a tank.
Yeah, or a truck, or a motorcycle, or this or that.
Or you fly a plane.
Planes are a bit more complicated, let's just say.
And I've heard the argument that just because Rey knows how to dismantle parts, that doesn't automatically mean she's an engineer.
Yes.
True, but when it comes to a story, these are things that you can logically infer.
No.
Because again, the movie shouldn't have to state every skill a character
this is
has.
not a strong inference.
He's using the exact same term for the exact opposite function it defines as. Logical inference is deduction. He's talking about induction. He's doing the opposite pathway. So
logical inference would be the example you provided with the staff that she carries, that we therefore can infer she is able to use it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You're going backwards in time. You're trying to figure out what happened backwards in time. This is like the opposite of that.
Yeah. Inference is not, understanding something that is the opposite of what we should be inferring she can do.
It's like, I can skip rope, therefore I am a lion tamer. It's like, wait, how did you get from playing with a piece of rope to brandishing a bullwhip? And
it's like saying I'm an arsonist, therefore I'm also a firefighter.
Well, that's a bit opposite.
As a 15-year-old boy in a movie that has Call of Duty posters all over his room, and then there's a scene where he gets 30 straight kills playing Call of Duty, one can logically infer that he's been playing Call of Duty for a very long time, and he...
What?
Yes.
Maybe.
Well, I mean...
Yeah, but that's... what would the analogy be about this?
Does Rey have posters of the Millennium Falcon on her...
Okay, that 5 minutes before he plays the video game, it says, I've been playing this. I can play a video game. He sits down, he completely smashes everyone at the game. And then afterwards he says, oh, well, I've played video games before, but never really against anyone else. Something like that. And it's something that's just completely pulled out their arse.
No, I've watched other people play Call of Duty, but I've never played it myself.
Yeah,
I've always played the main campaign, but never the multiplayer.
Multiplayer is a whole other ball game. So even if you're good at Call of Duty, as soon as you jump into multiplayer, yeah, good luck.
This is not a good analogy.
Austin Unruh, pilot here, not too difficult to fly, very difficult to fly well and land. Yes, when you get your license, you have to go through gliders. Was it 1,000 hours? I can't remember how long it is, but it's a lot of time up in the air in a glider until you get your actual pilot's license. So,
and that's just learning to keep it in the air without nosediving.
Yes.
Because someone else carries you up there and then detaches the glider.
Yep. Here is Punished Berserker again. She can paraglide, therefore she can fly in a prop plane, therefore she's a Blue Angel aerospace engineer, gold showers lunch. He's going
with the analogy of her being an engineer because she's a scavenger. I'm trying to think.
Yeah, that's what I said.
It's going from grade school to university level.
Playing video games. This is playing video games and then having posters for video games. But this isn't, again, real life scrap guys. We don't. I think we've already explained this like a billion times.
American pickers.
He's very good at it. If this was Rey, however, people would say she's a Mary Sue because having Call of Duty posters doesn't necessarily mean she is good at Call of Duty.
I would agree. Just because you have all these ornamentations on your wall
doesn't mean you're good at the game. You're just a big fan.
No, but I would still agree that it's an inference.
Sure, it is, but it's a very weak one. And, I have paraphernalia of a thing I like. It doesn't mean I'm any good at it.
And besides, in Rey's case, the thing that we're supposed to assume she's good at is actually the opposite of what we see her doing, aka she's a scavenger, aka she should be a good builder. The analogy that you're talking about would be that she has loads of Minecraft and Fortnite posters up on her wall, and therefore she's good at Call of Duty.
He's trying to. Earlier he was saying that. Well, this is like show don't tell argument. If you ever, and then, but the thing is, this is kind of tell don't infer. I think telling is a lot because this isn't showing by any means. Because showing would be like actually showing them being good at a certain thing rather than saying that they're good at a certain thing.
Showing something in a movie has to build up the scene. You have to actually have framing. You have to do all the actions. It's a lot of work. Whereas if you just have some dialogue saying, it's Steve. Oh my God, he's the champion of the pit for the past 2 years. Oh my God. It's like, okay, that's faster. And we don't need to go through all that detail. And then the next scene, we see him being awesome. It's like, oh, he's awesome. We get it.
But I would also say that telling someone is a lot stronger than inference.
It's faster. It's more efficient in a movie. I would rather in a book.
It's concrete. If you say someone, oh yeah, I hear you're a crack shot. That's a concrete thing that's established. Whereas if you show, I don't know, them having a gun, that might not necessarily infer that they're a crack shot. It's just that they have a gun,
right?
And then you can infer that. Yeah, you can infer that they know how to use it, but that's not telling you, or that's not concrete that they know how to use it.
It doesn't determine aptitude, right?
Mm-hmm. But I'm more just saying that he tried to say that this is show versus telling, and I would say no, it's tell versus inferring.
I want as much detail as possible to make the scene believable, and nothing. If you want to keep going, you're wasting my time. Because if we can all agree she can do these things, then we're fine. The reason why we call her Mary Sue is we don't know how she knows all these things and why she's so amazing at everything instantly. When we know by lore of the most popular thing in Star Wars, which is the Force, how she can be so skilled at it without having any experience.
Collect posters. See how ridiculous this is? Now,
okay, let's say she had books. Let's say she had posters. Let's say she had all this paraphernalia about the Force. Would that suddenly mean she can use it?
No.
Of course not.
Just because someone is an engineer doesn't automatically make them a pilot. That's fair.
Those are two different things. Like, what are you talking about?
And yeah, like the thing is about engineers that a car, like people who designed planes in World War II weren't necessarily the people, or usually weren't the people actually flying the damn things.
I would argue that people who
make engines don't fly planes.
Yeah, I just know people who are airplane mechanics. They would know how to fly, not necessarily meaning they have their license, but they would know a heck of a lot more about that plane than the pilot would, and they would know how to fly it in case they wanted to. So, but would they be an ace pilot? No.
And again, being skilled in taking things apart does not mean you're skilled in putting things back together.
I love that he's saying, well, from her taking things apart, that means that she can put things together, which means that she can fly a ship.
She can take apart one giant, wreckage, and therefore she might be able to build a ship that she's never seen or been in before.
No, but he's jumping off inferences. So it's like, well, we can infer that because she's a scavenger, we can infer she's an engineer, which means we can infer that she's a pilot.
But I'm talking about that she's scavenging from a giant wreckage of a Star Destroyer, which means she knows how to repair the Millennium Falcon, which are not only two different skill sets, they're two different ships that require potentially entirely different parts. It would be like me using my own, knowing the CPU of my computer, and therefore I can use that CPU to repair a supercomputer, despite the fact they need different technology.
Yeah. But it's fun. If you look at the hyperdrive of a Star Destroyer and compare it to the hyperdrive of the the only other ones we see is the Naboo royal ship, because we see the hyperdrive in that. There's kind of some big differences.
It's almost as if they're different machinery.
It is.
But I want to address about the world building of Star Wars. This is just how I always view the series, but flying doesn't seem like it's something that is that hard to learn.
Okay.
I always thought flying was just like driving in our world. Almost everyone drives in our world, so I always just assume that everyone flies in Star Wars. I mean, look at Coruscant.
I would agree with that.
No, these aren't ships in the background. Okay, that ship is there, but the rest of them are speeders.
Well, no, I agree with what he's saying. These people can all fly just like most people know how to drive a car. But there's a difference between that and being a really good pilot like Han Solo or Rey for some reason. That would be I
would say it's more common.
That would be like your Michael Schumacher.
In this world, it's more common because there is their equivalent, or it's not their equivalent of driving, but it's their equivalent of also sailing, and it's their equivalent of actual flight put together into starfighters because they have all the similar transportation necessities.
Yeah, what I'm saying is the skill set.
These are cars. These are flying cars. He says, look at Coruscant with their flying speeders. That means that they all fly ships. No. A speeder's different to a ship.
No, but what I'm saying is that even if that's true, the skill set would be different in the sense that you've got a top driver in our real world being like an F1 driver. He still drives a car, but he's far better at it than you and I.
Yeah, it's
just
also
a lot of people will fly ships, but that doesn't mean they're going to be better than Han Solo.
Right.
And these ships are always all going to be different. Yeah, so it's like the controls of a biplane, which you can get today, is going to be different to a passenger liner, which is going to be different to a jumbo jet, which is going to be different to a fighter pilot, like a Spitfire.
Yeah, if this is the case, if everyone can do it, then we wouldn't have Anakin being the best pilot. Everyone would be amazing. Everyone could do everything else. They would be doing U-turns and everything crazy that anyone else could do. So Luke wouldn't be a great pilot. Anakin wouldn't be a great pilot. Poe wouldn't be none of this would happen. Everyone can just do it. It's just a skill everyone has.
Hey, I can drive, but that doesn't mean I can do a handbrake turn.
Right.
Try it. You never tried it.
This is
Maybe
true.
you'll be good at it.
This was real life. I can guarantee there would be thousands of accidents a day. So the point I'm trying to make is that flying...
Okay, so he's...
probably are. The Coruscant's a big world.
He's making the argument that because if this was reality, flying ships would be smashing all the time. which says nothing of possible safety precautions and all the various things that would not happen in a Star Wars film because you don't think about the mundane life of people driving and going to work and this and that. You're not concerned with that. You're concerned about high-speed car chases and space battles. So, yeah, maybe there is some security, but we don't need to speculate about that because we don't care. We sort of assume that a civil engineer or someone, wait a second, that's a gun. We should put some safety on that. We should have some, rules and regulations on who owns what. And it's like, yeah, there should be. That makes sense. All the basic stuff in space opera has been assumed. We all assume this. This is kind of a given ticket in our admission. We go, yep, teleportation, going to speed of light, etc., etc. There's all these assumptions we make. Things just work.
Seems like something just as trivial as driving is for us.
No, it
so
isn't.
it's not like Rey hopped into a jet
It's more
from the
common,
United
but it's
States
not that
Air
trivial.
Force that would take years to learn. The Falcon is probably the equivalent of a big truck or something that is really fast. But let's say
It's still more complicated than a truck. You look at all the
It's a highly
controls.
maneuverable, big, heavy truck that's also very fast.
But you're in this scene, she's going up against people who are trained pilots. The equivalent would be me hopping in a HGV and going up against Formula One drivers or NASCAR drivers. That's the comparison. And that's
Driving is
exactly
like-
what Rey's doing.
Flying and driving is a lot more simple. You have a steering wheel, you have a brake.
Shiny, what he's implying, the point is that it's not comparing the difficulty of the real life technology to the make believe one. It's the idea that everyone can drive in our world. Everyone has some semblance of how
But
to fly.
even then,
It's like taking a flying course instead of a driving test.
But even then, flying is a lot more complicated than driving. I think the reason why driving is so common here is because driving is a lot more relatively simple. Again, you have a steering wheel, you have a gearbox, you have a brake, and accelerate, and a clutch, and then that's it. But when it comes to flying, there are so many more things, especially when you're flying at the speed of fucking light.
I'm willing to accept the idea that your average Joe in the Star Wars universe learns to fly.
I don't, because I think that it's definitely more common than it is people actually flying planes, because this is their equivalent of cargo ships, it's their equivalent of warships, it's their equivalent of passenger planes and all these other things. So it's more common because the entire economy is going to be based around people trading. And the example he used on Coruscant, that's speeders, they're not spaceships. It's more common. I don't think it's driving in the Star Wars universe is driving a speeder. It's not driving a spaceship.
All
or
right.
piloting.
Here's Austin Unruh again. I'd like to see this guy try to drive a semi-truck, which is much more complicated than your standard pickup. Yes, you have to get a license to drive large trucks. This is true. So,
well, my initial point in the scene is it's not about whether Rey can fly or not, and I'm more willing to accept that people in the Star Wars universe can fly because it's more of a necessary and common trait, or it would be in a galaxy far, far away. But in the scene, she's having to outrun people who are trained pilots in a heavily funded, technologically rich Empire clone, basically, and they're in smaller, more expensive, better suited ships for fighter combat. And the real world equivalent would be me hopping in an ice cream van and expecting to beat drag racers.
it's a bit of a stretch, and that's part of the problem. If it was focused on her and her force abilities, and she has these innate skills, and that's the point of the story, we can get behind that. But having reflexes of an old ship that hasn't been repaired or flown in years, it's like, oh, you're at mercy of technology. It doesn't matter how good your reflexes are.
And obviously, you're at the reflexes. You're at the mercy of your own skill level to theirs, which should not be equalable.
Yeah, she would get destroyed.
Fine. How does Rey learn how to fly the Falcon? especially since she never flew it before. Well, for a ship she never flew before, she sure as hell does know a lot about it.
Okay, wait a second. How does she do this? Well, she seems to know a lot about it. That doesn't mean she knows how to fly it.
She does.
That's like saying, I read this book. I know a lot about Italy. I've never actually gone there, though.
Well, I assume by she knows a lot about it, she's talking about like he's talking about knowing how to fly it and knowing the intricacies. But the problem is that she does. The problem is that she can just pull things out the wall, that she can just fly it on the spot.
That's like you taking your driver's test and acing it, saying, I read the entire manual, I knew it back to front, but you've never actually driven the car or a car. There's a big difference, and we all know it.
She made the ship hasn't flown in years, she knew exactly where the cockpit was and where the gunner positions were. She knew how Uncar Putt put a compressor on the ignition line that she felt put too much stress on the hyperdrive. She was able to bypass the compressor when there were many problems with the hyperdrive, and she knew that Uncar Putt stole the Falcon from the Irving boys who stole it from Duquesne, whoever the hell these people are. My point is, Rey certainly has a lot of knowledge about the Falcon's history with Uncar Putt and the mechanics behind it.
Yes.
So even though
I know the history of a Spitfire that sits in the middle of the National Air Museum, it doesn't mean I know how to fucking fly the damn thing.
She herself has admitted the thing has never flown in a very long time.
Why does she know all these things about the Falcon?
Yeah.
Well, because she knows all these things about the Falcon.
Therefore...
Thank you for clearing that up for me,
Therefore,
Mr. Gold.
She should be able to fly it. He's like, oh, really? Okay. Ivan the Mad Vandal. Less than 20% of the world's population drive cars. Really? Interesting.
I mean, I suppose so, yeah.
I guess we're also talking about like, I suppose a majority of China wouldn't really drive cars. It's
Cars are
only
really expensive in China.
Yeah, also like in much high denser population cities, it's harder to drive. Yeah, I suppose it's more like a Western world thing coming
There's
out.
1 billion people in India, and I'm pretty sure 1 billion people in India don't run cars. Quite a lot of them are in poverty and can't afford cars, so yeah.
she might never have flown it, she definitely knows her way around the ship and how it works. Again, her knowing a lot about the ship doesn't automatically mean she knows how to fly it, but because this is a movie, this is something we can logically infer. It's not a huge leap in...
Because medium, therefore it's possible.
Stop using this excuse. It's like you've given up on the last leg of the... You were building an argument, and then you gave up at the last point and just went, oh, it's a movie. Guess.
It's a movie. Yeah, he is just making the... Well, it's a film.
It's a movie. We can
Deal
guess
with it, yeah.
based on totally different factors.
I don't know. Why does she know how to fire a weapon? Because... How does she know how to use the Force? It's a film.
Yeah, JJ wrote a book. If you don't understand it, he wrote a book, and therefore she can fly the Falcon, okay? This was a radio drama. If you don't understand, obviously it's a radio drama, therefore she can fly.
Yeah.
I swear to God, I fucking hate this chair.
It's like you started off with your explanation, however, strange the through line of logic was, and then instead of bridging the two things, you just went, it's a movie. this can mean this because it's a movie.
You see, this could have worked if he used the genre of space opera where we just assume stuff a lot, but you can only take that so far. Like he was saying, everyone in The Fifth Element, there's flying cars and all this stuff. It's like everyone has a car, everyone can drive. It's like, yeah, sure. But as soon as we show off Rey's amazing driving skills, you're like, whoa, where'd she learn that?
And then, it's not as common as just driving because, people use a car every day. There's no equivalent of cars as the Starfighter. Because we're talking about X-Wings, which is a fighter. It's a fighter. It's not a civilian thing. And then we're also talking about ships like the Falcon. And we haven't actually seen any spaceships which are actively civilian like cars, for instance. Some of them have passenger liners. We have this, that, and the other, but we don't have the equivalent of a car because there is no equivalent of a car because it's not your car. It's a speeders are the cars.
Logic that a person who knows a lot about a ship knows how to fly it. Yes, she's never flown the ship before, but she clearly states she's flown other ships before. Say I was someone who loved driving cars, and I studied this one car a lot, but I've never driven it. Since I have...
Yes, in that scene where they're after the whole escapade, Finn and Rey are like, how did you do this? Well, I've flown ships, but never into orbit. No one trained you? No!
But it's right after they fly. She says she doesn't know how she flew so well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Outright states it. And you're like, oh, she has no idea how she's amazing. The same thing, we don't know how she's so amazing with a crack shot with a pistol, or the Force, or lightsaber fighting, etc., etc. It's just, that's the whole theme throughout the story. She's amazing the second time through.
Have good driving experience. I would probably be fairly decent at driving that car the first
But
time
she's
I
not-
ever actually...
No.
Okay, and then get in an entirely different car and then drive through like a sewer drain.
You know the reason why you have to take a driving license? Do you know? You actually need experience before you drive. But hey, even then, Rey is actively being an ace, beating these TIE fighters up like nothing, doing the most amazing piloting we've ever seen in the Falcon, much better than Han Solo ever did. So why is she so good at it? And that's the question. But you can't just study something and then you immediately know how to fly. Again, I really love World War II Spitfires. I think they look gorgeous. I find them very interesting, but I wouldn't know for the life of me how to fly one.
But he says his first time driving this car he's never driven before, he'd do pretty well. It's like, no. No,
but we go one further. He does pretty well, and I go, okay, now get in this entirely different car you've never driven and drive through a dilapidated shopping mall while being chased by fucking Red Bull superbike experts and try and outrun them.
Who are shooting you?
Who are shooting? They have Uzis.
And you
this
have
is fucking stupid. And this is fucking stupid, Mr. Gold, and you know this.
And the gun is only locked in one position, so you have to handbrake.
You have no gun.
No. So someone else has a gun, but they can only fire forwards. That means you have to handbrake turn the car so that the front faces the back, and you can shoot the people behind you.
And then handbrake turn again to get back round. And you're going through a small shopping mall.
And there's kids everywhere. You can't kill the kids.
Yeah.
Loads of concession stands with people selling like Dunkin' Donuts.
They have that in the UK, really?
No, I've never seen one anyway.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
The only time I've ever seen one was in America.
Yeah, for sure.
What's our equivalent? Is it custard cream? No, not custard cream. Fuck, I've forgotten. I'm gonna have to.
Krispy Kreme?
Krispy Kremes. Thank you.
You guys have Krispy Kremes in the UK? Really? Awesome.
Yeah. They're delicious.
That would change your life.
Okay, fish and chip shop. There you go.
That changes your life, really?
She has to drive through a fish and chip shop.
Okay.
It's even smaller.
With the micro machine? How big are the shops?
It's like trying to navigate a target in a car you've never been in. While you're being chased by people on motorbikes with Uzis.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
There you go. There's the analogy in full.
Thank you, guys. I think we've exhausted this analogy. Okay.
Again, this is not a big leap in logic, but to some people, I guess it is. But even
Yes, it
if
is.
that...
In my brain, it's just great. It's like, thank you. That's great.
And you've taken the first line of logic and then not applied the rest of the logic or based on the rest of the scene that happens.
Bit of a stretch, yes.
That's not enough. Even if all of those reasons I point to still make you think she should not be able to fly the Falcon that well,
He's being very
I would actually
reductive
like
right
to
now.
go to the scene. I feel like people remember the scene radically different than what actually happened. She doesn't fly the Falcon like Han in the asteroid field or Chewie on Crate.
No, she
actually
flies it
does a
even
pretty
better.
poor job for the most part. Can we just watch the way she takes off? Let's count the amount of times she manages to hit something while taking off.
Also, she's doing this all without a co-pilot as well.
Wow. So, based... Oh, come on, that's the same impact.
Yeah, man, she's a really excellent pilot.
But
Dude,
what happens after this?
Run forward to when she's going through the Star Destroyer grave and she doesn't crash into anything.
So
She flies through a fucking super Star Destroyer with really tight corridors, and she does it to a point where I think someone even crashed inside the super Star Destroyer.
So-
and she's
The
flying
guy-
around with
the guy
fucking
behind-
ships.
The guy behind her crashes.
yeah, what I want to point out here is this is the common MO for Rey in The Force Awakens. Every time she does something the first time, she doesn't do it right. The second time, she's perfect. Okay? Every single thing. Flying, shooting, fighting, force powers, you name it.
Yeah, and there's no consequences for this
Yeah.
when she's fucking up.
I don't
at
remember
all.
the scene either because you know what? There was no value to it. She ends up winning the day anyway.
Bumps into things. And she bumps into things, and then during the fucking run through the Star Destroyer, she doesn't hit anything because it would have killed her.
It's like, yeah, you know, again, if you watch these movies and see Rey do anything, she's always fumbling the first time. And then out of nowhere, we don't know what happens in her brain, whether she downloads the Matrix or whatever.
No,
She's
we
just,
know that-
she knows
we know
Kung
that-
Fu like a master.
But no, but Smud, even beyond that, we know the reason why it's in the film because JJ wanted his cool shots.
Yeah, for sure. Of course. It was all fun and games. Yeah, I get it.
That's the whole thing for it, and it's not during any time when she's in danger because the TIE fighters, for some reason, even though they were like almost hitting them a second ago, like all of a sudden they just kind of piss off for a while, and it's like, oh well, we're just gonna kind of let her crash a little bit, and then we're gonna chase her.
Plot armor.
It's normal for a really good pilot to hit something that many times just
From a busted up plane or a busted up ship that hasn't flown in years.
Oh god, it's oh my.
And I think he's also missing the point that you can do this because the Millennium Falcon is immune to destruction.
And that's like saying no, but his whole argument is saying, well, you know, obviously it's fine for if you know you do all these things, these amazing abilities, as long as you fuck up at least a couple of times. It's like no. That's not how you do it at all. You don't just instantly just start being amazing. She's still doing all these amazing things. It doesn't matter that she fucked up a couple of times at the beginning.
Yeah, if this was spread out over the entire scene, like she keeps bumping into stuff and getting shot and losing parts.
She doesn't do it again. Then she flies completely perfectly and amazing. She flies better than Han Solo.
That would be, oh wow, she's not a Mary Sue. She's actually having to struggle and she loses and she's breaking things. That's like, yes, thank you.
If at the end of the fight or the escape, the Millennium Falcon literally cannot leave the atmosphere because it's so fucked. Because she's clanged it and been shot so many times, it's not airtight now. And it can't. It's leaking and things are breaking off it because she's been able to get away, but it's like this. It's ruined the Falcon. But no, it's fine after this.
Yeah, I know.
Again, no consequences. You think, like, imagine in the original trilogy, like, if Han Solo crashed his ship against a wall, he would have to, like, when he lands in the crater of the asteroid, he would have to repair it. And he actually does have to repair it. He has to fix the hyperdrive after, he couldn't go to hyperspace.
Now, to be fair, there does happen a scene after they're all jubilant and excited about being victorious. There's some brake thing she has to fix in the middle of the ship.
Yeah, but that's the compressor, isn't it?
I don't know exactly what it was, but she has to fiddle around with tools. Well,
I can tell you for a fact. I can't remember what it was, but it's not something she fucked up. We know that for a fact. It's not something she fucked up. It's gonna be something.
I'm pretty sure it's the compressor, and she's flown the ship and pushed it to extremes, and it's the compressor on the ship that is causing the engines to overload.
Don't they repeat the compressor thing in Rise of Skywalker as well? It says, "Oh well, the compressor can't handle hyperspace skipping."
Yeah.
But I told you it could. It's like,
and again, we're talking the ship takes damage, quote unquote, and the next scene it's fine.
Just while taking off. So yeah, Rey is off to a rocky start, which makes perfect sense considering she never flew the Falcon before. Now let's look at what happens next. She takes off and Finn tells her to stay low because it confuses the TIE fighter's tracking. She does a flip that I guess is kind of impressive, but not really.
So usually when this is implied as a plot device, that you have to fly low to get under radar and such, that's usually on a ground platform. Why would that on an active ship? Because the tracking is just kind of aiming at something in front of you. How would that, ruin people's aiming?
And surely it can't confuse the tracking on the fighters that are chasing you, because they just have to be behind you and shoot.
Yeah. So, when that comes from in fiction, where it usually comes from is usually radar aiming upwards, and it only goes to a certain point. If you go underneath the radar, which is physically stuck in a certain position, then that means you won't be detected. But again, that he's talking about fighters, which makes no fucking sense.
I just wanted to mention in the chat, there are such things as subclasses of the Mary Sue. There's one called the Anti-Mary Sue, or the Anti-Sue, which is, she's clumsy, she's not perfect, but she ends up solving all the problems anyway. So it's kind of like she's what's the word? She's falling upwards. Succeeding by failing.
Considering she's in an open area and she almost hits the ground. Then the two TIE fighters show up. Now it's time for me to readdress the double standard.
Show up.
The standard that Rey is held to compared to Anakin and Luke is ridiculous. Let's start with Luke. People say Rey's backstory doesn't match her skill set, but can we talk about Luke here? Luke was a damn farmer his whole life. He was no engineer really or a scavenger, but a farmer. His only flying...
But he never needed to be engineer. He never had any kind of engineering talent.
No one ever puts a gun to Luke's head and says, "Fix this thing or I'll shoot you."
And the only time that he's ever doing anything is when he's cleaning out R2 or taking off his restraining bolt.
I mean, these guys buy shit droids from Jawas quite frequently, so it's fair to assume he knows how to give a basic droid a service.
And he's not even doing anything complex. He's not even building a droid. So other than where he's doing little things to R2, show me a point where he's fixing ships or fixing anything of value. He's not an engineer. He's not.
Flying experience was a T-16, which, let's be real, he probably never flew in any kind of combat before.
Yes, he did.
So even if he had...
No, in combat specifically, no.
Yes, he did.
Because it's a civilian ship and it doesn't have weapons.
I used to bullseye womp rats in my T-16 back home. They're not much bigger than 2 meters. That's a combat scenario.
Well, I suppose he's talking about combat in with TIE fighters and such.
Even then, everyone knows he's a great pilot. He admits it to it. Ben admits to it. We have sufficient evidence in the narrative to make that assessment. So
he was also. Punch Berserker says that he was also talking about joining the Empire as a pilot.
Yes, in the extended or the deleted scenes, right? But we don't use that too much for arguments. But this is.
I could swear that he wanted to go to the. At least they say that he wanted to go to the academy.
Well,
he I don't know if it mentions pilot specifically, but he does say he wants to go to the Imperial Academy.
Yeah, the scene specific is right after the everyone's in that meeting room talking about how to destroy the Death Star, and Wedge is like, "That's impossible, even for a computer." And he's like, "It's not impossible. I can do it." So it's like he has this insight into fighting, or into at least targeting small objects, that he's able to take part in this bombing run. So
And they are set up.
exactly, it's set up. It's
And
not
again,
like throw the guy at the big giant death moon. It's like, whoop, no.
it's also like one of the only things he's good at. And on top of that, he doesn't succeed alone. He needs to be saved by Han Solo in order to succeed.
And that's
He
after
doesn't do it independently.
all the other guys have either been shot or helped shoot down the other TIE fighters. And yeah, he needs to be saved by Han Solo, and he needs to be helped by the ghost of Ben to help him actually make the shot. So it's not just he's amazing and perfect. Everyone has to die to clear the way for him. And then reluctantly, Mr. Han Solo comes in to save the day. And then he needs even more help from his spiritual dead uncle to tell him to use the Force. Of the thing he was trained in previously, which is timing, he was trained to block blaster bolts, block blaster bolts with a lightsaber with a blast shield over his face. And then he was asked to fire the shot without the targeting computer by using his feelings. So everything neatly sets up when you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's beautiful about it.
Until recently, so one of the streams back, I didn't realize that actually scene where he was deflecting blaster bolts, that was a connection to him, using the Force to aim, the torpedo down the hole. I never made that connection until like a few Smudcasts ago.
Oh, really? A lot of people have said that he literally used the Force to telekinetically move the missiles, and I was like, wait a second, what are you talking about? How does he do that? It's like, I don't think so. I don't think that's what happened. Remember, Ben said to let go of all these hesitations and focus on firing, not to use mystical powers to move missiles down a giant tube. So anyway, Bogue, do the wombats shoot back? No, they do not, sir. They're just defenseless wombats. Okay, we're at almost 3 hours. We're at almost 30 minutes into this 2 hour and 26-minute video. You guys want to stop? What do you feel like doing?
Well, I'm going to go get some shut eye.
Okay. Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate it.
No worries. I don't know if this guy breaks the video up into parts at all.
Oh yes,
I certainly would.
Yeah, it's a big long haul, and he has a lot more to say on these topics. He very rarely goes into other things yet. I haven't noticed them all because I haven't watched the whole thing yet. But it's a long haul, guys.
It's like a nice round before we end, like maybe 30 minutes.
You want to go to 30 minutes? All right, let's do it.
Sure.
Voice, you going to go right now?
I'll make it to 30.
All right,
sure.
Let's do it.
Has the most basic skill set to fly something, is it realistic that he manages to fight in a battle against a military-grade force? Is it realistic that he goes against dozens of TIE fighters? Is it realistic that he manages to survive an attack from Darth Vader? Is it realistic that he...
Yeah, he's not on his own. He's fighting with other pilots. It's not 16 versus him. It's him versus the odd TIE fighter.
And I like to compare this to Rey. She doesn't really need other people's help aside from escaping the what is it, the Death Planet, whatever it's called, Starkiller Base.
Once he's in the trench, he just has to go in a straight line till he sees the thing. Right. He's not ducking and dodging and weaving through the wreckage of a Star Destroyer. It's a mildly narrow trench.
He's going really fast, though.
He's got fire support from pursuing TIE fighters the entire time.
And again, this is what you're allowed allowance for how many skill points you can have. So you can only have, you can have, you'd be really good at one thing and then, also good at another thing and then not good at anything else. Luke is not good at hand-to-hand combat, for instance. He's not very strong. He's not physically capable, and he gets his he gets his ass kicked in the bar, and he needs Obi-Wan to come save him. And then on the Death Star, I'm trying to think of any other moments that he needed to be saved, but I can't think of any right now. But he's competent enough, but he's only really good at a couple of things. Rey is good at everything. It's not a good comparison, and Rey doesn't need to be saved. Luke does. Luke needs to be saved in this scene that we're watching right now.
Made a 1 in a million shot, Is it realistic that
It's
he was
not
only
one in a
one of
million
4
shot.
pilots to
That's what
Yeah, he says
Han
that's 1 in a
says,
million, but
yeah.
that could be an exaggeration
Yeah.
from Solo. And plus, he's using the Force as well, and Solo doesn't know about that.
manage to survive while trained pilots could not? People give slack to Luke for this, but Rey manages to survive an attack against 2 TIE fighters, and it's unrealistic? Now, let's move on to Anakin, because
Okay, that was the first time for her flying the ship, whereas Luke had other experience flying. So
Yes. It's like he's trying to say this is some kind of double standard. It really is not. Because if you put Luke in this situation, if you just reverse the genders and change the names, it's completely different.
So in this argument, he's going to talk about Anakin, and young Anakin to me has always been a Mary Sue. So
It's not the fact that she is good. It's how they do it. And again, she's good at everything. It's not very well explained at all. It's not even set up.
And if Evan Monroe was here, he'd go on about what this through line of argumentation is. It's whataboutism, which is, not a good one to stand by. Like I said, if your defense for the franchise is to point out how a bad thing I've criticized is present in a different part of the same series, then you've not helped defend the series in the slightest.
Oh, there's a good comment by George Kells in the chat. R2 almost dies, and even Luke says, "I've lost R2." He gets shot by Darth Vader. And you're like, "Oh shit, that's not good." So, but yeah, that's the thing. Luke just can't, because of plot armor, R2 can't die, and Luke's X-wing.
Well, I mean, it wasn't plot armor back in A New Hope.
Yeah, I mean, there is the fear that it's certainly tension filled, so you expect he could possibly die because it's the only one movie. You didn't expect to see a second film back in the early 80s, but there's enough tension that all these other planes are getting shot out of the sky. You're getting to the last few hundred meters. That's the beauty of tension in this scene. So it builds up to it very well. Here's Ever Jance. Thank you. The Death Star mission and the trench run have stakes. It's a Hail Mary. Yes, exactly. You're right. It is a last attempt.
They're really not comparable because they've been handled in completely different ways, and they've got completely different context and what things are happening differently. Rey doesn't survive because someone saves her. She survives because she's just that good, and she can pilot better than anyone. Luke doesn't outpilot anyone. He doesn't outpilot Vader. He doesn't outpilot anyone else. He just muddles along through until the end, and he needs saving.
this is much. For one, Anakin is 9 years old in The Phantom Menace. 9 years old. He manages to win the pod race after not even managing to finish one before in his life. Then he manages to fly into space having no knowledge of the controls.
Autopilot.
You're
and manages
talking
to
about the
destroy the capital
prequels.
ship.
People actively criticize the prequels for a long time. Have you not seen anyone criticize these?
Okay.
No one's saying they're good.
So we understand Anakin's a Mary Sue. Again, this is just my opinion. We can talk about it later if you like. And autopilot.
No, I think I agree.
Okay. All right. Great.
I think for the most part in The Phantom Menace, yes, he is. I think he's arguably less of a Mary Sue in like Revenge of the Sith.
Yes. He gets
and Attack of the Clones as well.
for sure. Yep. It's young Anakin I'm referring to. Yep.
Accidentally, while all the trained pilots could not do that. Like, in what world is what Rey did more impressive than what Anakin did?
We've
I just
established
really
R2
don't
can
understand. I
pilot ships, right?
really
Yeah.
don't.
How
Honestly,
much
that
do you
last
think R2 is helping him right now?
That's a good question. I don't know, but the autopilot got him pretty much into range of this giant ship. So at that point, R2's helping him fly. That's true. Even R2 disconnects the autopilot, so he knows what's going on.
point about Luke and Anakin should be enough, but let's continue anyway. For literally a majority of this fight, she is just flying in an open field of sand. Again, nothing even remotely impressive for a character in Star Wars. Also, I just wanted to point out that Luke and Anakin both had the burden of also being in charge of the guns, while in this case, Finn is in charge while Rey just needs to focus on flying.
No,
She makes like two
Finn
somewhat
loses
cool
the
turns, I
control
guess.
of the gun. The gun jams.
And then she has to do that crazy maneuver to make the proper aim angle for the gun to hit the TIE fighter. Which is because of Rey, not because of Finn.
Before going to Star Destroyer. But is that really impressive? No. She flies.
It's not impressive. She dodges these two trained pilots with top of the line ships compared to an old junk thing flying through a Death Star. Okay.
To the Star Destroyer, which is pretty impressive, and then does the cool flip at the end, which I will give is really impressive.
Okay, so he's saying it's not impressive, then he admits it's both impressive in two cases. I don't. What is argument style, sir? You're tricking yourself.
Even if very few pilots can make the move that Rey did, can we please stop diminishing the effect the Force has on being a pilot?
There is no evidence she even knows about the Force or how it even works.
Okay, so what works in terms of piloting is it makes you're more sensitive. So it can help pilot, but you need to be trained in it in order to heighten senses. So you need to be trained in the Force in order to the heightened senses to work, or at least in the way the canon uses it. You usually have, so there's different aspects of Force ability. There's Force sensitivity in terms of like your senses are heightened. There's like telekinesis, and there's a couple other ones that I can't remember. I think there's a third or a fourth one. And usually, as a youngling, you'll display one or two of these traits. Anakin at the beginning, the way they explain it, or in External Material, is that this is his sensitivity, which is allowing him to do these abilities. But it's not really that. I still think it's too much of a gap, because you still have to be trained in order to become an ace pilot. And yes, the Force can help you become a better pilot, but usually you're trained as a pilot, and we're not using this young Anakin as an example because it's a terrible example. It's something they've had to fix afterwards. It's not
good.
Yes, it's not good.
Yeah, so Shiny mentioned Jedi still have to be trained. So
it's not, yeah, you Jedi have to be trained. You isn't like, oh, I've got the Force, therefore I'm a good pilot.
Right.
It's no, the Force helps you pilot if you're trained how to pilot with the Force.
Provided the ship can actually handle your reflexes and actually respond, so that's a totally different thing. Then we have...
And both Anakin have had experience flying their respective, vehicles before.
Oh yeah, experience is a big part. It's the same argument with Luke, who doesn't know about using the Force to pilot, and yet he's still a good pilot. So we also have Poe, we have Han, we have Chewie. They don't have the Force. They're amazing pilots. That's all experience and training. With young Anakin and Rey, they're Mary Sue's though, so it's like they just can do stuff.
Yeah, and he's using this as an excuse that Rey is good because she knows how to use the Force to pilot, but she doesn't know she has the Force right now.
Exactly. So that's the problem with the Rey argument. She has no idea what this Force thing is, how her reflexes are accelerated or whatever, and Luke Skywalker has been a myth all this time. So I think that's a good point to end off. Like, this is a really silly thing to talk about. It's like, what are you arguing for, sir? But I think we should finish it there. I think the boys should get to bed, and we should take a break, because tomorrow, hopefully, if everything checks out, I have to still get feedback from Jessie Gender. We should be having her on the stream. So,
oh my goodness.
Yeah, that'll be fun. Talking about Star Trek and all kinds of geeky things on TV and things we like and all sorts of fun non-Star Wars related things, maybe. Maybe just Star Trek related, we're not sure. Depends how the conversation goes. Mm-hmm. So thanks, guys, for tuning in. This is going to take at least 2 weeks, depending on... That was half an hour from 2 hours and a half. Depending on how many people join us. Glib is, I'm sure, going to extend the time by about a factor of 2. So, yeah, and that says nothing of the joys of LiteratureDevil if he pops on. And
this will end up being a series.
Yeah, and plus in 2 weeks' time, when we're done, we might be able to get the Goldman on board.
You know, I remember once, I was going through the comments, and they were kind of butthurt that we didn't go through the entirety of the video. It's like, do you know how long fuck it took to get through half an hour of this shit?
Did you see my comment chain? I'm only on
going to get through, but you know, you got to give us time. This is a lot to break down.
Yeah. So I'm only on the 50th minute, and I have about 60 points I've written down. I've only shared about 40, 45 with the chat or with the comment. And then someone was replying to me trying to defend Rey, and I'm like, oh dear, sir, you're not. So it takes time.
Voice.
We could bring on Rags and Mauler, Thomas, and doing someone in the chat.
If you guys want,
well, why not?
We could ask them. Sure, why not? Go ahead.
If you want this to be the long,
I'd be happy to jump in with them or vice versa. I don't mind. Yeah, sure, why not?
But yeah, no, we will get through all of it, I'm sure. But we all need a break.
Yes,
I'm sure I can speak for everyone there. It will be a slow and steady process, but we will get there.
We can only take so much retardation at a time. You have to take it in small doses, otherwise you kind of become an alcoholic.
I'm glad it's well thought out. I'm glad that he's structured his thoughts. It's a bit rambly, and some of the points I've never heard before. I don't know why he's addressing them so much, but
I've heard quite a lot of. I've heard a fair deal of these arguments before from people from different spheres of the internet. So it's like addressing them all in one big bunch.
Yeah,
which is why this is going to take so long.
I would have broken this down into like 6 videos at least, but anyway. Yeah. That's that. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. Thanks for suggestions. This came out of nowhere. I knew it was coming, but I didn't know if he would actually deliver on the 20th, and he did. So keep those suggestions coming, and hopefully by this time tomorrow, we'll be talking to Jesse Gender about Star Trek. Have yourself a great night.
Yeah, this video is bad because it's longer than the film.
Oh, yeah?
I win.
Is that the argument? Okay. Yeah. Oh, dear. Well, thanks for tuning in, folks.
Goodbye.